more trees.
Yeah.
Just around the neighborhood, 495.
I was just going to say, right, I made a bit of a study. My mom used to say, she used to take her mom out to go leaf peeping. And I asked her when she aged up into it if she wanted to go do the same thing. And she goes, honestly, just drive me around town.
Right.
You don't have to go out of town for it.
That's true.
I always,
For the
so
chair, we're live on HCAM TV.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So I will call to order the Hopkinton Planning Board meeting for Monday, October 19th. It is currently 7 p.m. And before we get started, I'm going to read the remote conducted open meetings guidelines. So as a preliminary matter, this is Gary Trendle, Planning Board Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jane Moran.
Jane Moran, present.
Rob Benson. Okay, Rob, I suspect will be on shortly. Dave Paul.
Dave Paul here, and I can hear you.
Great. Mary Larson Marlowe. Oh, Mary, we couldn't quite hear you there.
Mary Larson Marlowe here.
There we go.
Okay.
Deb Feinberg.
Deb Feinberg here.
Sundar Sivaraman.
Sundar Sivaraman here.
Muriel Kramer.
Muriel Kramer, present.
And Fran DeYoung.
Fran DeYoung, present.
All right. And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Gelsich.
John Gelsich here.
Ms. Pemberton.
Stephanie Pemberton here.
And is Mr. Paradise on?
I am. Phil Paradise of Beta here.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for joining us. And we do have a handful of anticipated speakers. We can read through those folks as we get to those hearings, but let me quickly read this statement. So again, this open meeting of the Hopkinton Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. It will further include several public hearings. For this meeting, the planning board is convened by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. So shortly we will turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. First, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude the remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Additionally, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, particularly if you've got a lot of background noise or kids yelling for ice cream like mine are right now. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify by their name and address only. And then I will call on each by name and afford maximum of 3 minutes for any comments. And finally, each vote will be taken in the meeting, or each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And then lastly, when we adjourn, we will also do that by a roll call vote. All right, so now that we're through that, and I see Mr. Benson. So glad to have you here. Thank you. Really quickly, from an agenda perspective, we do have a handful of administrative items to get through tonight, and we're going to do our best to get through those quickly. We have been asked to continue the public hearing for Buckland and Leonard Streets. And just as a reminder, this is for Buckland and Leonard, not the petition to construct Leonard Street, which will be on our November 2nd meeting. We have some time, and I'm hopeful that we can wrap up the Maspinock Woods hearing for West Elm Street, which I think we should all be familiar with. We've got amendments to a special permit and site plan. We're continuing the Deer Ridge Estates proposal, Lincoln Street and Cedar Street extension. And then we are technically continuing the petition to construct a road on Chester Street. Although that being said, we postponed that last time due to time constraints. So we're effectively, this will be our first intro into that meeting tonight. All right, so administrative items. First and foremost, we have another board appointment for Zoning Advisory Committee. And we have an applicant, Rachel Rosen, who, if you recall, recently applied for the Growth Study Committee. And I think she had, well, let me just pull those words back in my mouth. John, can you just remind us how many remaining seats do we have open on Zoning Advisory Committee? Just want to confirm that before we move forward for everyone on the board.
There's just one open seat.
Okay. And that seat, is that specified as anything in particular?
No.
Okay. And that's been open for quite a while, correct?
It's been open since the terms expired, which was, I want to say, July 31st. The board did appoint Jim Cirilio to it, but he did not actually want the appointment, so he returned the appointment. So now the seat is open again.
Okay, thank you. And so let me just see if Rachel is
She's here. She's on.
I am here.
Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
How are you?
Good evening. Doing well.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm hoping that we can avoid, I'm hoping that we all sort of believe that a lot of Q&A or questions for you are unnecessary, but I did want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the board. So maybe if you just want to tell us a little bit about your background, very briefly, as well as why you're interested in the Zoning Advisory Committee.
Absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you briefly about my background. As I said in my statement, I'm interested in working on the Zoning Advisory Committee. And I looked up the word advisor, sort of the definition, sort of to support, to help somebody who has a deep knowledge and experience in a certain area, as well as cross-functional knowledge. And that's certainly my background. Those of you who have read my statement, I'm a data scientist by training. I've worked in that area for a long time, and I've lived in Hopkinton for about 14 years now. So I'm very interested in being the advisor on the Zoning Advisory Committee, bringing deep experience, bringing knowledge, bringing some cross-functional support for the Zoning Advisory Committee. And I thank you for your interest.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And just to confirm, are you, I should probably know the answer to this, but is this for a one-year seat or a two-year seat?
All at-large seats, which this is, would be for a 2-year.
Okay, got it.
Hey,
Thank you.
John, I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Are we now at all 2 years because we're cycling? No?
No, the board appointed positions are 1 year.
Yes.
sorry, Mary, did you have something to add?
Nope, just, I was gonna just say that.
Okay. All right. Well, Rachel, I'm super excited to see you apply, and maybe just to move things along, if there aren't any questions for you, then I would entertain a motion to appoint Rachel Rosen to the Zoning Advisory Committee.
So moved. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Muriel seconds.
There's no further discussion. We'll move to a roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes. And thank you, Rachel, for applying.
Rob Benson,
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave,
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar,
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Muriel.
Yeah, Muriel, I'm going to just say, Rachel, I really appreciate that you came back. I always like to see some new faces, and I was sorry that we weren't able to interview you the last time. Your qualifications are wonderful, and we really appreciate that you're stepping up. So Muriel Kramer is a yes.
Thank you, Muriel. And Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
Okay. Rachel, congratulations. Welcome to the Zoning Advisory Committee. And I know
And I'll
that
see you on Monday.
yeah, they are. It's a busy time of year, so I echo
Okay.
Muriel's sentiments, and really glad that we had a chance to at least meet briefly tonight, and look forward to the work and output from the Zoning Advisory Committee. So thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, just moving on. Quick update on the Highland Park minor modification to special permit for fence. We're actually going to hold off on that discussion. Won't get into a lot of detail now, but they've got a little bit more work to do, so they will be back at the November 2nd meeting. Next item on the agenda is for the Eversource liquefaction facility, and they've got a request for a minor modification to stormwater permit for improvements required by the Hopkinton Fire Department. So I see Mr. Blackburn is here. And John, are there other folks that we need to unmute for this
Ms.
discussion?
Adamski is on the phone call as well.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Adamski is on the phone call.
Okay. Great.
Mr. Chair, I've got Mike 2 here for Eversource LNG Engineering as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'm cautiously hopeful this will be pretty straightforward. But for the Eversource folks, do you want to very quickly walk through what it is you are requesting?
Take care of this, Mike. So to the board, appreciate you taking the time to hear us tonight.
Sorry, Mr. Blackburn. Can you just quickly introduce yourself?
Sorry, Jim Blackburn, Eversource LNG. I'm a project manager. I manage the capital investment group that handles the engineering projects at the Hopkinton LNG facility.
Thank you.
So I know it seems like some of the members of the board have probably changed over the last year or two since I've been here. But many of you probably recall that we had come through the board for the stormwater permit for the Hopkinton liquefier project. So we've been underway with that for approximately a year and a half with construction. And this project, when we had done that, the original stormwater permit, I believe we had done it both for the liquefier project, but at the same time, we had done it for a secondary access road, which ran along the east side of the existing LNG storage tanks. And that had helped us provide some better access to the tank farm area. And we had done that in coordination with Chief Slammin. What we're looking to do, we had some collaboration with the chief as part of the liquefier project, kind of talking about future, potential fire protection type projects at the facility. And one of the things that had come up during those conversations is his desire to potentially take a look at and see if there's a means for us to bring additional water to the site if there was ever a need because of some issue, say with the water main over on Wilson Street. And so what we did is look to see if there was a means of bringing fire water in from the reservoir down kind of closer to the boat ramp and bring it up the street. And so while we didn't have the ability to do that out on the street, what we did, talking with the chief, he had the ability to run fire hose up the street. And then what we proposed is to put a line to connect into our existing fire water loop. And that line would run down the secondary access road along the edge of it, tying into our main loop. And so that's what we've tried to do here. I think what we also added was 3 additional fire hydrants as part of that work. And then also an area for, say, a vehicle to pull off when they first enter the fire access road coming in off of Legacy Farms North. And so to do that without necessarily ripping up everything that we just had done with the secondary access road, you'll see, I think, or at least was probably presented in the plan submitted to the town, that fire water main runs adjacent but outside of the existing fence line. And then we bring the hydrants above ground within the fence. And so there's pretty limited disturbance overall, but it is temporary for outside the fence, except for, I believe, the 400 square foot of area for the pull-off area. So I don't know if the board has the drawings. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but.
And Jim, I can share my screen if people want. I have the drawings pulled up.
Sure.
Sure. If you have them pulled up, then why don't we just go ahead and share quickly, just so that everyone knows exactly where this is going.
Tracy, you should be able to share it now.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys all see that?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so here are the tanks. Rafferty Legacy Farm North Road is up here, and where the construction is currently going is down here to the south. So as Jim was describing, there's about 1,300 linear feet of new pipeline coming up along the other side of the secondary access road. So the secondary access road is right here. So up here, there's a small pull-off that the chief had requested for fire apparatus vehicles. And again, here's you can see the fire water line proposed here alongside. This is all within the previous work area of the secondary access road. And the intent is there are still some erosion control measures that are in place along that limit of work. And we would just go and, re-staple silt fencing and restake straw wattles as needed.
And then you mentioned that some of the work is being done outside of the fence.
Outside of the security fence, but inside of the existing silt fences.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Cleared outside of the fence line, that's probably 15 or 20 feet, maybe even more in certain areas. So I think that's the clarification I should have made.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to see here, we're also part of the plan set. So the proposed silt fence, which is approximately where our previous silt fence line was, here's the existing security fence that Jim was talking about. And there is an existing gravel road just alongside the other side of that security fence. And that's where this water line is going for the most part.
Okay. All right, thanks for the clarification. All right, so we have some principal planner comments. John, do you want to provide your overview?
So this is a modification to a previously approved stormwater management permit. As I've said in the memo, the board can make a determination that this is either minor and doesn't require a new filing of an application, or they can determine it's significant and requires a modification of the application, which requires a new filing. It looks like it's minor. The fire chief requested these. It's not a forgotten piece that they didn't add on to the original permit. It's something that was asked for later, as far as I understand. So it seems insignificant to me.
Okay, thanks, John. All right, so so for the Eversource folks, anything else to add? And then if you don't, then I'll go ahead and open it up for questions from the planning board.
I don't have anything further.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll just share my perspective. This, as people have noted previously, this is at the request of our fire department. It seems like a minor modification to me. Most of it's temporary, except for the pullover area. But that being said, do any of the members of the board have questions for the Eversource team?
Gary, to the chair.
Yes, go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, on the pullout that they're proposing, the 400-foot or the 8x50, is that going to require any additional build up of land? Are they going to lay down additional rock? What is the composition of that? Because I just know by walking by there, it looks like it does slope off a little bit to the west, might be. So just want a little bit more detail, if I could, on that pullout. Maybe I'll direct it to Jim, to the chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
Or maybe Mike, could you speak to that?
Sure. Mr. Chair, this is Mike 2 with Eversource Engineering. Stacy, if you can go to the details of the civil set here, you'll see here we for our fire apparatus pull-out road section here, we've got a detail that calls out the exact same construction as the secondary access road. We're just going to carry through the construction of the compaction and the construction of subgrade and fill in that area in accordance with the same exact construction methodology as the secondary access road. I hope that answers your question.
Mike, I can't recall, I could probably find it in a picture or something, but is that area already up to grade, or do you feel like we're going to be raising the grade in that area, anything significant?
We would be raising the grade in that area in accordance with this detail. It's pretty flat. It doesn't significantly drop off that I can remember. And if you remember, Jim, we're storing temporary storage, but construction materials there, and it's probably 25 or 30 feet wide in that area that we're storing 12-inch pipe. So again, it's of my opinion that it's pretty flat there. We would be bringing up grade in accordance with this detail here, this 18 inches of sub base and a fine gravel finish on top.
So
does that satisfy your question, Fran?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that satisfies my question. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
So I just want to ask through you, Mr. Chair, John, I understand the reasoning that this is a minor change to a very big project. I just want to make sure we're not getting into a tangle, because it seems like a big enough. I don't want to make any determination that it's anything other than a minor change. I just want to make sure we're protected going forward, that a change of this size and scope wouldn't cause us problems in a future project. I want to support the fire chief and the work that they're doing and facilitate this change. It's just a pretty big effort to be called a minor change, I think.
So there's no, as far as I know, there's no definition of what a significant change is. It's really more of what the board decides. So it reads, if the planning board determines that the change or alteration is significant based on the stormwater management standards in section 7.0 and construction practices that meet or exceed the purposes and intent of the bylaw and regulations, the planning board may require that an amended application be filed. So it's really up to the judgment of the board as to whether this is significant in relation to the permit that was issued or if it's insignificant.
I guess it makes sense to ask our engineer you know, how comfortable he is with this kind of change. They did the stormwater review.
Fair question. Mr. Paradise?
So, yeah, I didn't have a chance to review this earlier, but from what I look at and on the screen here, it looks like it's a subsurface installation of a pipe that will be, I would assume the surface is going to be restored in a loam and seed fashion, and if that's the case, then I don't see a long-term impact related to stormwater as a result of this.
Mike, can you just confirm that what Mr. Paradise has said, that's correct on the loam and seed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we've proposed to restore any of the areas impacted by the trench to its original condition, which would include loam and seed if that is the case.
Okay. And Muriel, I guess so. We can discuss as a group. You know, my take on this. You know, I'm trying to think how this might affect stormwater management. And for me, the pipe itself is temporary, and I know that they are required to, you know, mitigate risks with updated silt fencing and whatnot. As I look at the pull-off area, you know, to me, it's a pervious, it's a porous surface. It's got some surface area. It's a reasonably flat grade now. And again, I'm not sure I see where this would require some redesign, some substantial redesign or re-engineering of the stormwater management plan, just given the nature of the changes. That's my take. But maybe really quickly we can just go around the virtual table and get people's thoughts on it.
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
I didn't necessarily want to start a controversy. It's a fairly sizable undertaking. I understand in the context, it probably doesn't have a huge impact. I just wanted to make sure that we were positioned appropriately going forward.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and let me just maybe I'll just ask it this way: Are there members of the board that are uncomfortable with this being considered a minor site modification?
I'm not, if I can speak to the chair.
Please go ahead, Deb.
I'm not concerned about it being major or minor, but I do have some questions concerning where that pull-off area is, considering that lots of water runs through and underneath the access there. And I don't see a lot of detail or silt fencing along that, detail along that area. Or if Tracy could, maybe I'm not seeing something, but it's up in that corner of the entrance ramp. I don't see. Oh, okay. Yeah. So where are those? So the vehicles are going to be coming in that little box just before the dash line. Right. I can't control the, yeah. In the,
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Can you circle where the fire vehicles were going to be connecting with the?
So here's Rafferty Road. They would go through the gates here, and this is the pull off. Yeah.
Oh, let's see that. Yeah, I don't see a pull off there. I don't see.
It's this little area right here.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
So it's actually narrower than the road itself.
Correct.
Right. So technically, another vehicle couldn't get by if they needed to. What's the dimension of that pull off?
8 foot by 50.
80 by 50.
And that was sized based on the request by the chief, and the idea was that a vehicle could pull off, say like a pumper truck could pull into that area in order to hook up to, you see there's a hydrant right there in order to backfeed the system. And so what he wanted to do is be able to place the vehicle there, but not necessarily block the actual roadway itself. So that provided enough room on the shoulder to get the vehicle out of the way to the extent where you still would have access on the primary road.
Okay, oh, okay, so I'm much clearer now. I appreciate the detailed view. So yeah, I would vote for a minor change because I was just concerned that it was outside of the fencing is where the truck would pull over.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns from the board? Okay. So John, help me out with the language here. So this would just be, I guess I can entertain a motion to amend the stormwater management plan for the Eversource liquefaction facility as described in the meeting notes and on this call. Is that sufficient, John?
I think you can say as depicted in the plans.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to modify the stormwater management plan for the Eversource liquefaction facility as depicted in the plans.
To the chair, Jane Moran, yes. I so moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Brahman.
Okay. And if there's no further discussion, we'll move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
Jane, yeah, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Stephanie, was that sufficiently clear? I think so. I heard a yes.
One more time, Mr.
Okay.
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Thanks, Sundar. Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you to the Eversource team. We appreciate your willingness to work with the fire department and to update these plans. So thank you.
As always, thank you very much for the board's time. It's been very good to us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we've got 2 minutes to review. So I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the August 18th, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, there are actually 2 sets of minutes from August 18th. One is the planning board's meeting and one is the joint meeting with the select board.
Ah, yes. So we'll do those separately. I will entertain a motion to accept the August 18th, 2020 minutes from the planning board meeting.
So moved.
Mary Larson Marlowe, second.
No further discussion. We'll move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes. And a thank you to Stephanie. She's doing a great job on these minutes. I really appreciate it.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, abstain. I don't think I was a member at the time yet.
I guess it's the next meeting you were at.
Correct.
Okay. So those carry. And then I'll also entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the August 18th, 2020 joint meeting with the select board.
Muriel Kramer, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
All right, we'll move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, abstain.
All right, those carry. And then lastly, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the August 27th, 2020 meeting.
I have a minor modification for that. Is now the time for me to put it in?
Sure, that's perfect, Deb.
Okay, page 2, paragraph 6. Deborah Feinberg stated the old Rafferty Road is not associated with North Legacy Farm project, but has been noted that it's been affected by construction by LNG and the construction vehicles that are servicing North Legacy that's what I stated, but it kind of there were two double negatives that had been typed up, and I just wanted to clarify that it was that they were associated, not associated. So I was
Okay.
just cleaning it up a little.
Stephanie, are you clear on those changes?
Through the chair, yes, I am. She actually emailed me before.
Great. Oh, that's perfect. Wonderful. Thank you, Deb. All right, so then I will modify, or I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from August 27th, 2020 with the changes as noted by Deb Feinberg.
So moved, Muriel.
Second,
Second,
All right, so it's a second from Jane. Roll call vote, Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
yes. Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran Dion, yes.
All right. Okay, and then the last, we're not going to get into a lot of detail here, but just a couple of things with regards to future meetings. Number one, I do want to continue the option to allow other planning board members to take hearings as they come up. And so we do have a new one that is coming up that will start at the next meeting on November 2nd. It's an open space proposal at 0 Hayden Row. And I'm just wondering if I don't have a lot of details on that yet, and we'll certainly get into it next week, but I just wanted to ask now if there are any volunteers to take that one so that they can be prepared to lead that hearing at the next meeting. Fran.
I'm happy to do it, Mr. Chair.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Fran. Appreciate it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think that all of us have been on the planning board long enough to know the struggle that we have between balancing the planning aspects of this board with the regulatory piece of it with the hearings. And I think that number one, we're overdue on coming back to the master plan updates that Muriel had started, what is now a while back. And then secondly, I want to make sure that we commit some time to thinking and identifying kind of some other planning objectives for us as a board to undertake, in particular in 2021. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail now, like I said, because it's really not on the agenda. We have a full agenda anyways. But what I'd like to propose is that we add a meeting specifically for these planning topics. And John and I was looking at the calendar. We're kind of trying to figure out when to fit this in. And our tentative proposal is, I just want to make sure I get this
November
right.
25th.
No, so we were actually thinking November 30th. And the rationale there is that because we already have a 3-week gap between, we have a meeting on the 16th of November, and then the next meeting wouldn't be until the 7th of December. If we did earlier, then we're going to be in a sequence where we're meeting 3 weeks in a row. So our thought was that November 30th meeting, albeit it's right after the Thanksgiving holiday, would still give us a little bit of a gap and prevent us from having, meetings 3 weeks in a row. So I don't know, I just want to throw that out there as a date and see if we can get some alignment. If there's a better date, then I'm certainly open to it. And if there's something sooner, I'm certainly open to it. But what are your thoughts as a group?
I'm fine with that.
I actually really appreciate this, Gary. I think it's a good idea.
I'll second that. I think it is a good idea.
Okay.
So Gary, the agenda would be to discuss recommendations coming out from the growth committee. Is that what roughly this would consist of?
Yes and no. So there's a lot of things that we've been tabling because we continue to have so many hearings. One of those is the master plan updates that Muriel has been spearheading. We do owe, I think, more time to the work that the Growth Study Committee, and they've been increasing their frequency of meetings, and I think they've got some great conversations started about about what their initiatives will be over the next year. We have I think we need to circle back with the Zoning Advisory Committee. They are also very feverishly working on some updates. And then lastly, I want to, as a group, talk about some very specific. I want us to identify some specific goals for us to move forward in 2021. I think, candidly, one of those is going to be some review of our application process, and I've already started to do some brainstorming on ways that we can make this hearing process a little bit more consistent for our applicants, as well as hopefully just make for a more transparent and meaningful conversation for the public and for us as a board. And then my hope is we can identify a couple of other topics that we as a group want to get after. And I think those will stem from the master plan. The master plan identified some potential projects, but I don't think it's realistic to try and go after all of them. I'd rather identify a couple of priorities, and then we can talk about how we'll work to meet those over the coming year.
No, thanks for that clarity, Gary. And I'm completely aligned with that goal.
Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's plan on November 30th. I think there's actually going to be a lot to fit in there, just as we start going through some of the board updates and having some discussion around this. But I think it makes sense to carve this out as a specific meeting, and then my hope is that we can start to incorporate more updates on a regular basis as we move forward, so that we don't need to carve out separate meetings.
Would that meeting also have a public hearing forum, or would that be just the board meeting to discuss the topics?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And certainly all of our meetings are open to the public. I think that we're generally, if people have comments and want to attend, they're welcome to do so. It's not a public hearing, but I think, like we do in most of our meetings, if there are people that have thoughts on it, we are certainly open to their input and perspective.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so that's it for our administrative items. And I guess at this point, we should open the public hearings. So I will entertain a motion to open the public hearings for Street and Leonard Street, for Maspinock Woods, for Deer Ridge Estates, and for petition to construct on Chester Street.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Jane Moran, second.
All right, no further discussion. Roll call vote. Gary Trundle, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Thanks, Mary. Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Shivaraman, yes.
Muriel?
Bill Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
Okay. So as we move forward, the first thing that we will do is the applicant for Buckland and Leonard Street has requested that we continue that hearing to November 2nd. So I will entertain a motion to continue that hearing to November 2nd, 2020.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, if I may jump in, he also requested a continuation of the decision.
I was going to ask, and I knew that you would jump in if I missed it. So let me revise that. I will entertain a motion to continue the hearing to November 2nd, 2020, and the decision date to November 9th, 2020.
16th.
16th. Thank you. Someday I will get this right. Is there a motion?
Rob Benson, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
Okay. We'll move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Muriel?
Joe Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
Okay. And we have also, just given all the delays for the Leonard Street applicant, we will be putting them first on the agenda for November 2nd. So appreciate the applicant's patience as we work through that one. All right, so moving forward to Maspinock Woods. And do we have the applicant on? Looking for Mr. Barbieri here. John, do you know, have you had any correspondence with Mr. Barbieri?
So Mr. Barbieri sent the, sorry, there's some feedback somewhere. Mr. Barbieri sent a letter stating all of the changes that they were proposed as we requested. That was the only correspondence I had. He's aware of the meeting. He did not ask me for any details.
Okay. Is there any reason we can't continue or shouldn't? I guess I'm a little, I don't think I've ever had a hearing where the applicant was not on. Is there any reason why we can't continue, or I guess I'm just looking at you, John, or I guess the board to see if we should continue with this, or?
There's no reason the board can't continue discussing the project and even making a decision. The board could also wait till later in the meeting to see if Mr. Barbieri shows up, or you can continue, discuss a little bit and continue, or just continue from here. It's up to the board.
Yeah.
Would continue in continuation as in postponement, or continue as in continue talking?
Continue would mean as in postpone. So I'll tell you, I'm going to propose this. And I guess I'm just a little concerned that if we have any questions and the applicant is not able to answer them, and I don't want to continue it yet, but maybe my proposal, and I'll look to the board to see if this makes sense. Let's go ahead and just hold off on this discussion until later in the meeting.
Sure.
And see if Mr. Barbieri is able to join. He's typically present on our calls, so I'm a little surprised that he's not. But does that make sense to everyone? And simple head nod.
Makes sense to me.
Let's just put him at the last item for the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And just a request, John, would you, while we're going through the meeting, do you want to just, if you have an email from him, you just want to quickly drop him a line? I don't know if he'll be seeing it at 7:48 on a Monday night, but
yep, just sent him one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So then on that note, let's go ahead and move forward to Deer Ridge Estates. And at this point, I'll hand it over to our vice chair, Mr. Benson, who is leading the hearing for this proposal.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'll go ahead and just direct it to Rob. I'm sorry. I am going to be recusing myself from this hearing, so I'll stay on the meeting. I'm going to mute and stop my video. I just wanted to make sure that that was known to the board members and to the applicant and to the public.
Thanks, Muriel. I know you sent a note to me, Gary, and John, but thanks for letting everyone else know. And that's it. So we have Courtney Dadarian and Joe. Joe, Marquardon, do you need to be unmuted or?
Good evening.
Good evening. So just to kind of start off, we've received many letters since our last meeting the planning board had a site walk with the applicant of the Lincoln Street, Cedar Street extension development, which that side would be is proposed as Deer Ridge Run. And so since that last meeting, we've had several letters which are greatly appreciated by the board. It makes for such a better process when the community has a vested interest in what goes on in town. So definitely appreciate all the letters from the abutters and people that live on Lincoln Street. Just so I'm clear and the board's clear, we're not proposing a through street. So all the letters basically state that all the residents are against a through street. We're evaluating the project as put forth by the applicant and seeing if it meets the town's bylaws. So that's kind of what we're doing, and that's the process we're working through. So in response to the length of Lincoln Street and a dead end street, the one thing I think, as opposed to just jumping directly into our outline, one thing I do think we should discuss as a board, and John, I'm looking for some clarification here. There's not a waiver request for the length of a dead end street in the application. And can you provide some guidance on, it seems like it should be there. So I'm looking for some guidance on.
So the applicant did not include a waiver request for the 1,000 feet upper limit of dead end road. That doesn't mean they can't submit one now. They can't. They could right now request a waiver for that. That would just be a formality. There's a bigger discussion that might need to be had. Whereas, can you go longer than 1,000 feet? Since that's not necessarily allowed for in the zoning bylaws. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
yeah,
questions.
I think I'm trying to understand, like, because they're extending a pre-existing street, a waiver still would be required. So that's question number one.
Yes.
So a waiver still would be required. And so I think the next point is we should kind of, as opposed to going through step by step our normal outline process, we should discuss our ability to grant a waiver for maybe the most critical item first, which would be the length of the dead end street. Does that make sense to the board? Any acknowledgement?
Yeah. Rob, this is Gary. I think that makes sense. It feels like a really important piece of this proposal, and I don't know if we necessarily want to vote on something right now, but I think it's worth us specifically discussing the impact of this and giving the applicant some feedback on where the board currently stands, in case they, that could alter how we move forward.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I don't think there's anything for us to vote on because there's no waiver requested. So I don't know a formal vote, but I was hoping to go around through the planning board members, and knowing the proposal, it would take, I'm going to ballpark these numbers here, but about an existing street of 1,700 linear feet to about 2,300 linear feet on the Lincoln Street side. So I'm hoping we can just go around to the members of the board and look for initial kind of thoughts. So, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Rob, before we do that, I wonder if it would make sense to give the applicant a chance to address if there was a reason they didn't request the waiver, or how they considered the maximum limit on dead end streets as they were designing this.
That's a great point. I kind of jumped the gun, and I definitely want to do that first. So Courtney or Joe, I'm not sure who would like to take this, but I think giving your perspective would be the best next step.
So what we tried to do in pulling this together, I guess, is try to get everybody to the same point. Courtney and Kyle are obviously very close to it, living right there in the neighborhood, speaking, hanging out socially with their neighbors, try to incorporate those concerns. getting you folks to appreciate all the time we have spent behind the scenes. That's a part of every project. Getting you folks to appreciate all the ideas that we're trying to balance. What we came back to was what pops up a couple of times in the regulations, extraordinary circumstances that roadways of lengths beyond what we normally consider, I don't want to say run of the mill, but routine, you folks can embrace if there are extraordinary circumstances. And we felt that the concerns of the neighborhood fall in that category. As we pulled it together, said, here is a thoughtful design that balances all those. And we hope that you folks would see that as well.
Okay, so Rob, through Rob.
I think Rob, oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can propose a waiver as just a process problem, but I would like to see a waiver presented, because I actually worked in the town of Southborough for 35 years and as a police officer, and stopped many, many, many people coming from Highland Parks, the Wedgwood area, who were trying to get through, shortcuts through Southborough to Wood Street, through Southville Road, trying to cut through. So I can understand these residents' concern, because if there was a cul-de-sac, or not a cul-de-sac, but a throughway, that would become a huge shortcut for the Highland people, people, Wedgwood Drive area, coming through and trying to get through a shortcut area. And that little road cannot handle that traffic. Wood Street is having a hard enough time. Southfield Road has a hard enough time. I think traffic is a huge concern for, our planning board and for the ZAC. And I would just like our committee to consider that going forward.
Thanks, Jane. Let me just, I appreciate those comments. I also appreciate the applicant living on the street, working with their neighbors, putting forth the plan, getting the input of the neighborhood. And as Joe said, all the feedback behind the scenes is instrumental to this process. I think there's one thing that I'm interested in, and I'll open it up to the board, but I just want to ask this one question before going around kind of in a around the horn fashion to the other board members. Was it considered to have just a single dead end street, like a single dead end street from Cedar Street Extension, to basically create a new dead end that wouldn't require any Lincoln Street, additional length to Lincoln Street? Was that ever considered?
We did, as part of the go-around, we did show a roadway at the 1,000-foot maximum from Cedar Street Extension, but it really didn't allow us to access some of the nicer portions of the project. All you folks that were able to make the site walk, we got in from both directions, a short distance, and then the property widened north-south, allowed us to do quite a few things, quite frankly. Take advantage of those trail networks, set aside more open space in a larger configuration, and get those house lots that the project needed to be viable. So once we got to the 1,000-foot maximum, working with the regulation, we felt we still needed something from Lincoln Street, some addition to Lincoln Street. We shorten Lincoln Street somewhat? Yes. But when we got to that point, we said, let's balance the lots. 4 from Cedar Street, 4 from Lincoln seemed to make the most sense.
Okay.
Rob, through the chair, can I just ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure,
Joe?
Frank, go ahead.
Again, through the chair, Joe, when you looked at the 1,000 feet, right now, I think the proposal is for 4 lots on that Cedar Street extension, correct? And what
Yes.
is the distance of that Cedar Street extension as it's laid out in the plan right now?
Depending on how you measure it, Fran, whether we run around the cul-de-sac or run straight through that island, we're generally on the order of 700 to 750 linear feet.
Got it. And if hypothetically you were to extend that to 1,000 feet, which is the maximum, did you assess or look at how many additional potential lots, or was it not a viable option at all once you added the additional 250 odd feet?
It took us to the point where we were then trying to reach some of the spots that we identified as prime home sites on the plan before you now with extremely long driveways. So we were 400 or 500 feet long with our driveways, creating situations we thought weren't as desirable as short driveways from the cul-de-sac.
Got it.
That exact number, I have it somewhere, but we're so many iterations past that, I'd have to dig through my files.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I have a question. Is the 1,000-foot limit starting from the 3rd Street, which is Cedar Street, all the way into where we walked as part of our site tour? Would that be the entire? Is that the limitation when we speak about the 1,000-foot limit?
Correct. That's a scenario that I'm envisioning. Yes.
Okay. And yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So if it's agreeable to the board, I'm going to go around the horn, and just as my monitor is showing, Mary, do you have any comments or questions or any initial thoughts on
Yeah, I do.
a
Thank
long
you.
dead end?
So first of all, I want to say that, we are here interpreting and helping to regulate the existing bylaws. We are not in the business of changing the bylaws right here and now. And the 1,000-foot limit is there for a reason. We make some exceptions to it, but in the range of, 200 feet or something like that. We don't make exceptions. What we're talking about up to 2,300 feet long. I think that's what we were told it would be with an extension onto Lincoln Street right now, 2,200 or 2,300. That is very long, and that carries some very real concerns for public safety from a standpoint of fire safety. And so from that perspective, I do not feel that the description of the lots and being able to reach the prime locations falls under extraordinary circumstances, which would allow us to extend the 1,000-foot limit to this extent. So my feeling at this point is that the current plan for the 2 cul-de-sacs is not workable. It does not comply with the bylaws, and it is not appropriate in the current design. I could definitely see a cul-de-sac. I totally get the point of not having a through street. So if I'm thinking with no through street in my mind as a possibility, so then it looks like a single cul-de-sac off of Cedar, which we obviously don't have a design in front of us, but we can just speculate. And dealing with the 1,000-foot cul-de-sac limit, obviously slightly longer driveways may be a possibility there, but that without a design in front of us to talk about it, and to talk about the fire safety mitigations that may be in play, and having Chief Slayman comment on those. I can't, go into it in detail, but I do think that that's something that we could talk about. I think it's pretty cut and dried that extending anything onto Lincoln Street, which is already 1,700 feet long as a dead end, is not workable with our current bylaws. Okay, I think that's it.
Thanks, Mary. Deb, do you have some comments or questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I guess along with Mary's thoughts, I would wonder, I know it's not a popular choice, but I would wonder if there were some speed impediments and some curves put in the road, and some signage, whether a through street is totally off the table. So I would press Mr. Markedon to maybe provide an option for the client that would show something that would be more attractive, that would not draw traffic through signage, speed bumps, curve, meandering street that perhaps would work. Because I'm, with Mary's thought, again, extraordinary circumstances isn't really something that we are really looking at. It would need a waiver. And to be fair, I don't think we've given that much length of road before to anybody for anything. So it does have to do with public safety, but that's just with my short tenure here in office. So if somebody has a history or where it's been done, I'd love to find out how it was done. Perhaps longer driveways from the Cedar Street side. I'm not sure exactly how he could get into that prime land.
Thanks, Deb.
I just have a question.
Sure, Jane.
Through Robert. So I understand that there's been a process through Chamberlain and, when that cul-de-sac went through, when they put the fire road through, what was the thought process and what is the understanding when the town came up with this, or maybe it was the planning board, what was the thought process that why they don't like cul-de-sacs versus a straight through? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, so I was not on the planning board when the Chamberlain Wayland Street project was before the planning board.
Was I?
I
So
think
I'm just wondering, because we made that decision, or the planning board made that decision for Chamberlain and Wayland because they did not want drive-through traffic. And I can see this being the same thing. And they will. Wedgewood Drive, Highland Street people will come through this to get to 495, the Mass Pike, and all of the other Route 9 areas, and that will become a thoroughfare. And I just don't see that this Cedar Street Extension Street can take that traffic. And so I'm wondering what the thought process was with the planning board when they came up with that ruling and that exemption.
So Rob, can I comment to that, please?
Sure, Dave.
So I'll say my side of it. My side of it was I voted no for the cul-de-sac, but I was outvoted 7-2. So I know that one of the reasons, Jane, that the fire department does not like, I should not say just the fire department, but all our safety teams do not like cul-de-sacs, is the concept of a tree falling down at the base end of a cul-de-sac, and emergency access has no way to get into the development at that point. That's why they always like two forms of egress.
Mhm. Understandable.
So I guess I might want to elaborate a little bit more unless you look at elaborate on different related subjects, or I mean same subject, different concepts. Okay, so I struggle with this a lot because to me, cul-de-sacs are not a good planning tool. It kind of separates the town instead of bringing the town together. But on the other side of it, I can understand fully what the neighbors are thinking, with the traffic. And
Oh, it's going to be huge.
it's a great area. Does that, mitigating circumstance, does that qualify just with the burden on the neighbors with that travel? So it's a dilemma that, I could see both sides of the story. The lack of cul-de-sacs is the benefit for the town, but it puts the burden on the neighbors. So what should we as the planning board, because we always have the neighbors present in one of these meetings and we always have the developer present, but realistically, we're the only ones representing the town. So it's just tough call.
If I could respond, Rob, through you.
Yeah, sure, Jane.
And I think that this is going to be a big, big question coming forward for our planning board coming forward, talking about traffic and shortcuts and roads that are currently used for shortcuts. Fruit Street, Front Street, all these other Granite Street that have become thoroughfares. And I think that this could be another major cut through for a lot of people. And I think we're in a position as a planning board to try and start to think about how we can control traffic, how, with fog lines and painting. I know the DPW has cut back a lot on painting lines, and and I don't want to get into all that because that's a Zach thing that I'm arguing with them right now. But I just don't want to see us get into a position where this little road, in some spaces where it's 18 feet wide, gets to the point where it could be a cut through. And I can see that could really happen. I mean, I've been there and I've done that. I used to write these people up at 5 o'clock in the morning when they would be flying through, and I would say, where are you going? And where are you coming from? Well, I'm coming from Hopkinton and the Highland Road area. And, I'm trying to get to the airport. I'm trying to get to the MBTA station, and all this. And that was coming through Wood Street, which is a tiny road. If we allow this little road, Cedar Street Extension, to become a thoroughfare, it's going to destroy their neighborhood.
Let's continue around. And Gary, if you could provide some comments and if you have questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I empathize. I live on a dead end street. I live on Chamberlain Street, and nobody that lives on a dead end street wants to see their street become a through road. But going back to Jane's comments, I also want to make the point here that no one is proposing this be a through road. This is not a question of cul-de-sac or through road. This is a question of a waiver for the length of a dead end street versus not being developed at all, or some other option that doesn't further lengthen Lincoln Street. And so for me, I go back to Mary's points of extraordinary circumstances. The residents might be able to make the case for why the reason to avoid a through street, but that's not the alternative here. and so to me, that argument of extraordinary circumstances doesn't apply, because the reality is that there's probably another option that may not result in 8 houses being built. Maybe it's 6 houses or 7 houses, but the that to me is not extraordinary. So my comment, I just a few more comments in general about I'll give a little bit more background. I was not on the board for Chamberlain Street, but I was at the Chamberlain Wayland proposal. I was at the hearing. Part of the rationale or justification for lengthening Chamberlain Street with the fire access road was that there was a fairly substantial wetlands crossing, and by making that an access road instead of a through road, that reduced the environmental impact. The other thing I'd say is that the original conventional plan that was submitted actually was a through road that connected Wayland and Chamberlain. So in that situation, there was it was a question of through road or cul-de-sacs, and I think that came into play as well. So that, again, I wasn't on the board. I didn't, so I probably can't represent that, but that was kind of my interpretation as to some of the rationale that the board used to substantiate their position. And the last point I'd make again is I just, at the end of the day, dead end streets are not good planning. I mean, we talk about traffic, and the reality is if majority of streets were cul-de-sacs and dead end streets, that just pushes all the traffic to a central artery, which can actually increase traffic. And I'm not suggesting that Lincoln Street be turned into a through street, because I totally understand, people bought on that because, in large part, because it was a dead end and because it was quiet and it gave them a quality of life that they really value. But I just, at the end of the day, lengthening dead end streets, we've all made the mistake of driving down a really long dead end street, and you get to the end and you turn around, and what do? You just drive really fast to get out of there, because it's, in this case, it's, it's almost a half mile long. So anyways, that's kind of my perspective on it. I think there is an alternative here. I think there's a way for the applicant to not make this a through road. And I'd really encourage them to go back to the drawing board and see if there's a way that they can, make something work without further lengthening Lincoln Street.
So Rob, quick point of order. I think every time I see the feedback, I see it coming from Sundar lighting up. So is it possible he has 2 speakers on or something?
Yes. Someone's have feedback. The whole Sundar, is it possible? Could you try muting?
Sure.
Thanks, Sundar. So
I think that seems to have solved the problem. So I'm just gonna go around to Dave, Sundar, and Fran to get thoughts. So Dave, would you like to go next?
I already spoke once, but I did want to make couple of real quick comments, not to take up too much time. One point I wanted to make is that a lot of folks have said to me on the planning board is, why do you guys approve waivers? Because why should you do that? If they can't build it as is, then it shouldn't be built, right? So why do we have to make exceptions for this type of situation? So, like I said, a dilemma for me on both sides. So that's one comment that comes on the, and I actually try to use that for commercial solar. That's why I voted against the commercial solar farms recently, because all of them required a waiver. So that's one of the criteria I use. I just wanted to share with people. The second thing is, on the flip side of it, currently the emergency access to Lincoln Street is bad, right? Because the fire truck gets all the way down the end there. How's it going to turn around and get out? So to me, a cul-de-sac there would actually help us with our fire safety. So just a couple comments, point on each side of this decision.
All right, Sundar, can you unmute? Sundar, I'd like to give you the opportunity if you have any comments or questions.
Sure. I don't have too many comments. I'm going to reserve the right to talk later. But I just, when I heard Dave talk about the fact that we already have a pre-existing problem with fire trucks not having the ability to navigate Lincoln Street properly, and the fact that a new cul-de-sac could actually help, that that does seem to resonate in my mind. But other than that, let me have others chime in, and I'll definitely have feedback later, Rob. But thank you.
Great. So let me just go around to Fran and give you the opportunity for comments or questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I'll start off by saying I really appreciate the letters that we've received and emails we received from the abutters and those residents on Lincoln Street. I think that speaks pretty loudly to how they feel, and definitely your voices are being heard. I'll echo a little bit of Mary's and Gary's comment. I do have some probably some questions, some extended questions on the rationale to extend the Lincoln Street itself. I think there's concerns with that, and it's been discussed by various members, so I won't rehash that, but that's something that sticks in my mind. So I would look at maybe ask the applicant to look at those other options. I do think that Cedar Street extension, going a little farther and being creative and potentially some options to get some additional units or some of those prime lots, make them available and increase the number there off the Cedar Street. That way, it really kind of maintains the I was call it the integrity or the kind of the current scenic look and feel of what Lincoln Street is at its present. So I think those are the three big areas that come to my mind on this. I'm open to further discussion and looking at other options from the applicant. Mr. Chair.
Joe, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, it seemed a little presumptuous on my end, but the next step would have included changes to Lincoln Street, upgrades to the width, to the surface. We feel that the cul-de-sac, I think Dave touched on it a moment ago, allows all the traffic that heads up there now, the trash truck, the UPS guy, to use that cul-de-sac would make an improvement in the function of Lincoln Street, separating the length, the concept idea from real life. It would actually benefit folks with a cul-de-sac and a functioning way to turn. That's all I offer.
All right, let me provide my comments, and then maybe we move to like a straw poll of what the board feels about a lengthening Lincoln Street. But my comments are, I absolutely love the fact a resident on the street bought the land next to it with the idea to develop it and do it in the best interests of their neighbors. I think that is usually the best projects can come about in Hopkinton and anywhere. I totally agree that making it if the landowner made a proposal for a through street and a through street was built, there definitely would be more traffic, but that's not in front of the planning board. So I just want to be very clear and make no mistake about this. There's no proposal for a through street. We're just trying to evaluate the plan and provide, at this stage of our process, provide feedback on the plan that's before us. One thing I would be personally interested in is a 1,000-foot street, a 1,000-foot dead end is allowed under our zoning bylaw for an open space development. And if a 1,000-foot dead end street from Cedar Street Extension could build 8 house lots, then in effect, it'd be the same project in my mind. I am concerned by having, and I'm concerned that this is a way to maximize the number of house lots by lengthening the street on the Lincoln Street side. And so if I could see a plan that had 8 house lots from Cedar Street Extension with a 1,000-foot or less dead end, that was still an open space development, that would make me feel much better. So that's my thoughts. I do think Lincoln Street would benefit from a cul-de-sac even if there was no additional house lots on it, a road just ending. It just literally ends with a driveway going up at a fairly good incline and a driveway going down at a fairly steep decline. So there's really not a good option to turn around. So that's my thoughts on it. But I think the next step here is to provide guidance to the developer and kind of take a straw poll of what the planning board thinks, unless anyone on the board thinks otherwise. So I'm just going to kind of go around.
Hey, Rob.
Yep.
Sorry, this is Gary Trendall. I wonder that there are a lot of members from the public, and I realize that this might take a little bit of time, but I'm wondering if it's worth, if there are members from the public that have thoughts on this, if it's worth
Yeah,
to share their perspective.
That's a great point.
As well, Rob.
What were you saying, Dave?
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't spend a lot of valuable time. Obviously, we want input from the public, but we've received a number of emails, and overwhelmingly, nobody wants. I guess if we rephrase it clearly to them that it's not the through a street, do they have any concerns with this plan and focus on this plan and try to keep it brief and because I think we're going to get the same feedback.
Yeah, let's try to do this in somewhat of a moderated fashion. But Courtney and Kyle, I'd love to hear. I see your hand raised over Zoom here, so I'd love to hear your input.
Thank you, Rob. The words extraordinary circumstance were brought up by some of the members of the board, and I couldn't think of a better term to use for Lincoln Street. I'm not sure how many roads in Hopkinton have their trash trucks back up down the road because they can't turn around. Their UPS trucks back down the road because they can't turn around. We are as far away from the school as you can possibly get, and our children have to walk to the end of the road with no sidewalks and no streetlights because a school bus can't turn around on the road. So when Joe says this was a well thought out plan, this wasn't just because we could put 4 lots on our road. This was to make our roads safer and more updated and more reasonable. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to put something in place where a fire truck can come down the road, turn around safely, and not have to back up down the road. As something that Deb said earlier, in regards to speed bumps, there is a sign right now at the end of our road that faces the residents that says slow. It's not coming off of Route 85, it's coming off of our street, which means the town felt as though the people on Lincoln Street were actually driving too fast down the road. So to add traffic to it, as Deb possibly recommended, making the through road would not be safe, and it would not be a good alternative in our opinion. It's very important that our neighbors need to speak. That's why I don't want to take up too much time. I want to defer. I'm sure a lot of my neighbors, both on Cedar Street Extension and on Lincoln Street, want to speak, but we just want to make sure that our cul-de-sac, it's not just a matter of putting houses in, it's a matter of making the roads safe for the people that live on here. The community is important, and right now it's not safe, and we think that our plan makes it safe.
Thanks, Courtney. I think that was a very good input for the board to hear. Is there anyone else on the Zoom meeting tonight that would like to have any comments from the public? If you can, you just try to use the Zoom feature. So down at the bottom, there's the participants button. If you click participants and raise hand, I see somebody physically raising their hand. Chuck. Chuck, would you go ahead? Introduce yourself and your address and
thank you. Chuck Daughtry, 25 Sanctuary Lane. Speaking as a member of the Hopkinton Area Land Trust Board of Directors, we just wanted to say that Halt is interested in being a party to discussions regarding potential open space. Uh, uh, Maury and Courtney have had some communication. Maury Gasser, the president of the board, and we trust that those can continue. But we do have some concerns about the configuration of the open space and potential trail access as currently proposed. Look forward to seeing revised plans and to continuing discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Is there anybody else on the Zoom meeting? I see Don Jackson, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see the tab. So I live at 4 Lincoln Street with my wife and my children. We've been here since 2018. The quiet nature of Lincoln Street and its walkability to the state park and to the train station were major factors in our decision to buy. We are very concerned about the potential safety ramifications of any plan that would lead to through traffic on Lincoln Street. And we very much appreciate Courtney and Kyle taking the initiative to try to propose a development that avoids it. It's coming back to Courtney's point, the school bus. My son has to be at the corner of Route 85 and Lincoln Street at 6:30 in the morning. And right now it is dark. And for those of you members of the board who drove down Lincoln Street to the walkthrough, just please imagine an 11-year-old child walking along that road, no sidewalks, no lights. Sun's not even up yet as traffic is zooming by to get to the train station. It's a huge concern. I appreciate Ms. Mason's comments, acknowledging just what a problem that's been elsewhere and the board's willingness to work with the applicants to come to a solution that prevents Lincoln Street being made into a through access road. I would also like to address Mr. Trendel's comments, and I think some other comments that were made that cul-de-sacs are not good planning. My mother was a city planner for many years. I appreciate the importance of planning, but good planning brings communities together. Right now, Lincoln Street is a vibrant community with a lot of interactions among our neighbors, facilitated precisely because we can be walking around our neighborhood. And increasing the traffic on Lincoln Street would destroy the community that already exists. And finally, from a safety standpoint, again, yes, access for emergency vehicles is critical. And as has already been pointed out, adding a cul-de-sac at the end of Lincoln Street would enhance rather than subtract from that. I will also point out that Massachusetts averages roughly 50 residential fire deaths per year, but 80 pedestrian deaths per year. So please be careful not to trade a less frequent, if more visible, emergency situation from a more frequent, but equally traumatic situation relating to traffic safety. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. I think, I don't know how many times I can restate this, but the only way a through street would be proposed is if the applicant and landowner propose a through street. That is the only way. The planning
Sorry,
board,
with all due respect, that's disingenuous. If
we can't have back and forth on this conversation. There is no way that a through road could be planned or put in place without the applicant proposing it. It's not the planning board's job to propose a development. It's to make sure it adheres to the guidelines. We can take a few more comments, but there's no, that's just a fact. So if you, Sirpia Srivanas.
Yeah, that's me. Yes, I'm Sripriya Srinivas, 34 Lincoln Street. I'm the person who's farthermost in this street, like the last house. I'd like to thank Ms. Jane Moran for all her points. And I'd also thank Mr. Benson for the idea you had given about a dead-end street or a cul-de-sac. Sorry, not a dead-end street, a cul-de-sac that comes from Cedar Street Extension. Hopefully, that's another idea to just see how that's going to work out. The reason why I mentioned this is because in the previous call I had mentioned that the way the cul-de-sac is designed is in such a way that the street is actually would the headlights of the cars would hit straight into my house, and I don't think that's being discussed at this point, because we're talking more about a cul-de-sac or not, or a through road or not kind of a thing. So that's why I'm more interested in seeing what the applicant would come up in terms of addressing these issues, and I'm equally eager to see how this is going to proceed. But thanks, Mr. Benson, for the suggestion on trying to see how a cul-de-sac from Cedar Street would come up.
Okay, great. Let's Joe, let's finish with you, I think.
You folks hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yep, go ahead.
At this point, based on the feedback that we have received from the board and from neighbors and abutters, I think we may be at the point where the design team needs to huddle with our co-applicants and kick around some of these ideas. We're at the point where maybe we should table this discussion temporarily, allow us to put pen to paper and see if we can't come up with a scenario that we can bring back to the board.
I appreciate that, Mr. Marquardt. I think, like I said, my comment was, and still is, I'd like to see just a design where 8 house lots were coming from Cedar Street, and then fundamentally be the same project. And then I wouldn't be opposed to, basically the project could be the same. And to me, if the end result is lengthening Lincoln Street a little bit, me personally, I'm only one member of the board, that would be reasonable, because you can still have the same number of house lots. That's my thoughts. But
Rob, through the chair.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to, I think kind of where you're going with is a few folks mentioned, just having a Cedar Street extension project, which I know this is a surprise to hear from me, but on the Cedar Street, on the Lincoln Street side, I did mention that a cul-de-sac would be helpful. And I'm thinking that it's not extending it a lot more from when we walked around. Obviously, if you put a cul-de-sac on it, that's going to extend it by 50 feet just by itself, right? The cul-de-sac itself. So if we do, if they do go back and make it just a Cedar Street extension project, I would also like to think about if there's possibilities for improvements to Lincoln Street, whether it's a cul-de-sac or whether it's widening some of the areas just to make it a little better. So I just wanted to make that point.
I totally agree with you, Dave. Having a cul-de-sac on Lincoln Street would be a better end result for the street and the neighbors and the residents than having just, as Courtney said, no ability for the garbage truck to turn around and all of those issues. We're just trying to adhere to our bylaws as best we can, is my perspective. Was there any more comments? Then I'm going to take the advice, take Joe's comments of looking to move this to an additional meeting. Did you have a time frame you wanted to move this or continue this to?
We would rather stick with it. I know you folks have an awful lot on your agendas, but we do have issues with wetlands on the site, and we'd like to get some kind of consensus of what shape this would take so we could reach out to the Conservation Commission before snow, before cold weather makes that review on their part impossible. So I guess long-winded as soon as possible.
So would you like us to continue with the outline, or I'm not?
Continue to a hearing where we can assess and I guess reflect on all that you've given us, but I don't want to continue for a month or 6 weeks down the road. I'd like to get right back before you.
But continue it from this point to the next meeting.
Right.
Yep. So John, do we have our next meeting is November 2nd?
Correct. Our next meeting is November 2nd, and we've got the Leonard Street application, the Fruit Street Scenic Road application, and the new Hayden Row OS LPD application on that agenda. After that, it would be November 16th.
Without knowing any better, do we have bandwidth on our November 2nd meeting as a board on our agenda? Do we have bandwidth on our agenda?
You know, sorry,
Go ahead, Gary.
through you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned about that agenda in that Leonard Street is a complicated one. Fruit Street, which we've already continued, there's a lot of public input and complexity with that, even though it's just a scenic road. And then we have a new hearing that's already slated. I mean, I think, I guess what I'm wondering is, I'm wondering if there's a way. I mean, we're not gonna. I think that we could potentially give a few minutes to the applicant to kind of review the changes that they're proposing. But I think it's probably it's going to be challenging for us to get into a lot of discussion at that meeting. So I mean, that just might be one option, that we do put them on, but we keep that time relatively short so they can give us an update. And then at the November 16th meeting, we would be able to commit more time and go into more details on that. I don't know if people have thoughts, but I trying to be respectful and get this through, but we've already got 3 pretty beefy hearings on that November 2nd meeting.
I think that's a good idea, a half hour just to give us an update from what they found, right?
Joe, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think we can work with that. We'll obviously streamline what we present, keep you folks on track, but I'd like to get back before you and tackle these issues.
And John, do we need to take any type of vote to move the hearing to the next meeting or anything?
Yes, vote to continue the hearing.
And do we need to continue the deadline or just the hearing?
I believe just the hearing. The deadline. Yep. So the deadline for the decision is 90 days after the close of the public hearing. So you don't need to continue the decision, just the hearing.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to our next meeting on November 2nd.
Gary Trindle, so moved.
Sundar Sivaraman seconded.
All right, great. Let me go around. Rob Benson, yes. Gary.
Gary Trindle, yes.
I don't know if Muriel abstained. I don't know that I need to ask her. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Fran.
Randy Young, yes.
Dave.
Dave Paul, yes.
Sundar.
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
And Jane.
Jane Moran, yes.
All right, great. So this public hearing is continued to our next meeting, November 2nd. And I'd like to hand back the chair to Gary.
All right.
Gary, can I ask a quick process question? It's real quick.
Sure, Dave. Go ahead.
So John just mentioned the last meeting, we extended it to 90 days after the close. Why don't we just do that with everything so we don't have to extend decisions?
Can I take that, Mr. Chair?
Please. Go ahead.
Some applications require a decision after a certain amount of time. Special permits are usually 90 days after the close of the public hearing, whereas for like A&Rs, it's 21 days from the submission date that a decision needs to be rendered. So it's all statute-based deadlines.
Thanks. I just had to ask the obvious question.
Yep.
Fair question, Dave. And again, I can never get it straight. So
I think I asked that same question 4 years ago, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So just checking here, doesn't look like Mr. Barbieri is on, but let's go ahead and move forward with Chester Street. So is Sean McDonald
Hi.
on?
Yes, we are. And they're unmuted.
All right. And okay, it's listed as Amy McDonald, so maybe that's where my it took
That's
me a minute
me.
there. How are you? All right. Well, and we appreciate your flexibility from continuing from the last meeting, but maybe just to start, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of background on what you are proposing here.
We are proposing to build a
And
house.
sorry, Mr. McDonald, just for formality, if you can again just introduce yourself and your address.
I live on 27 Downey Street, and my name is Sean McDonald.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. The reason why this land has been in our family since 1984, and it's been a great spot to live throughout the years I've been up there. And when I was 16 years old, this is when we got notification by the town that they were going to try to limit the paper street roads in that area. And it was my first time speaking in public in town meeting, and we were able to save this road at town meeting in some place where, you know, in my dreams to be moving up there. And it's coming to par right now.
So if you could just give us a little bit more, just give us an overview of what it is you're proposing.
It's basically, go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, you would like me to give a little intro?
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, what we're talking about at this spot is land owned by the McDonald family. As Sean mentioned a moment ago, they acquired the land in 1983 and put it in a trust where Marilyn McDonald, Sean's mom, is the trustee. There are two parcels on Cedar Street Extension. That configuration, the roadway and...
Sorry, Joe, can you confirm we're talking about Chester Street, right?
The street, yes.
You said Cedar Street Extension.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to make sure.
I caught up in the last one. Yeah, my apologies. Chester Street, yes. Chester Street extends from the corner at Hillcrest Drive and shows up in a plan from 1933. There are several parcels that make up the 0.93 acres that Sean hopes to build on. That plan endorsed, we feel, is a subdivision plan. Predates the subdivision control law, predates zoning here in Hopkinton. What Sean is proposing is the lot on the easterly side, the right-hand side, as you head up Hillcrest, is to develop that for a single-family home. Move from his spot on Downey Street with his family up to that location. It's almost entirely wooded. You can see there's a footpath that bisects the property, allows folks to walk from Hillcrest down to Mrs. McDonald's place on Kiwi Lane. Otherwise, the parcel is almost entirely wooded, bordered chiefly on the east and the north by land of EMC. On the westerly side are owners along Kiwi Road, and then a couple of homes that front on Hillcrest Drive. The lots enjoy the opportunity to tie into municipal water and sewer. Both services are right there at the corner of Hillcrest. So Sean came to me and said, what are our options here? And it seemed the best thing to do was to extend Chester Street, to upgrade Chester Street. The issues that popped up were the existing width of Chester Street at 25 foot wide from that 1933 plan. After we discussed it, went through a few things with Attorney Neal, and seemed the best course of action was to come to you folks with a petition to upgrade Chester Street, but to something that is appropriate for the use. With a 5 foot wide right of way, we don't have as many options as some other spots in town. Given the fact that Sean is proposing to build on lot 1, and right now there are no plans to build on lot 2, the scope seemed to indicate that we need something that was more fitting. So we came back with a 12 foot wide paved surface with curbing, and then the 2 foot shoulder on either side for a 16 foot wide access to the home that you see there on the site plan that John was able to share with us. That seemed the way to go. Bring our utilities in from Hillcrest. We're very close to existing hydrants on Hillcrest in 2 locations. I think 380 feet is the maximum distance from those hydrants. So a 345-foot extension beyond the end of Hillcrest to access the home kept us under the 500-foot limit, allowed us to avoid turnarounds and pullouts. Given the fact that we'll only have a couple of car trips a day, it seemed like that was an alternative that made an awful lot of sense. We, after a discussion with John Gelchich back in the spring, we decided we would embrace the idea of trying to mitigate stormwater. So up the end, beyond the proposed house and driveway, is our proposed stormwater mitigation. We've got sheet flow to a 4-bay, which will empty into an infiltration basin and have an outlet in the northeast corner. We are back and forth with Beta. Quite frankly, an error was made on my part. We did not supply Beta with all the information that they needed to do a thorough review. So we kind of fumbled our opportunity from the continued last hearing to tonight. I need to get back to Phil at Beta with that missing information. I thought we could at least kick around any concerns the board may have with regard to the access to the home and the general nature of construction.
All right, thanks, Joe, and appreciate the update. And I do think, so we're certainly not going to discuss the stormwater plans tonight, if that's okay. But maybe what we can do just to keep this moving forward is we can progress through the other components of the outline and hopefully get some clarity there. Yes, Dave.
I'm really confused, and I was hoping you could help me from a high level. I'm looking at Google Maps. There's no Chester Street. I could see other streets. Can maybe the applicant just orient us where Chester Street is? Because I see a bunch of paper streets on the Google Maps.
So down the bottom of the page that John has shared with us is Hillcrest.
Yeah, but Hillcrest is a square street. I've never seen a square street before. Right. If you look on Google Maps, it goes north, then south, then east, then west.
Yeah, so.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, Hillcrest Drive will meet Haywood Street at the start.
Okay, this is a big help. Oh, I didn't see this in the notes. So it's really just parallel to Keebly Road, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Map does not show this across the same thing.
I'm sorry, who was that? Was that Sundar?
I think he just made a comment that he was wondering the same thing.
Okay, and Sundar, just so you know, for whatever reason your audio is breaking apart and it's hard to hear you. We can't hear you, Sundar.
Is he on the same continent?
I'm muting myself. I had the same question as I got the answer. I'm muting.
Sundar, sorry, we can't. I'm not sure.
I'm moving to a new place. But hopefully better internet.
Sundar, I'm wondering if is it worth disconnecting and dialing back in, because it doesn't seem to matter where you are. We're not able to understand you. We can't even understand you.
You can also use the chat window, right?
Yes. Okay, he's motioning to something. So all right, he's gonna call back in. Okay. All right. So I do think, and fair question, Dave. I think that just helps orient everyone. Let's go ahead and keep this moving forward. And like I said, we've see how far we can get. Really quickly, John, do you just want to give us the planner's perspective on this? And I guess specifically, if you also wouldn't mind just hitting on the decision criteria that we should be evaluating this proposal against.
Sure. So I'll start with the decision criteria. This is to be evaluated to the subdivision standards as much as possible. That's basically the decision criteria. It's not like a special permit where it has to meet other things. It's basically you're trying to have them build it to the subdivision standards as best as possible. And that's similar to what we're seeing on Buckland and Leonard for those of you who are involved in that as well. It appears to be straightforward road construction. Fire department has called out that they're proposing a 12-foot wide road when the subdivision standards are a minimum of 20 feet. You'll see some other comments from the fire department that I think should be discussed, but generally this is for them to get frontage on this lot in order to build a house. And then I'm also going to add, I had a phone call with the abutter. I don't know the address. I forget what it is, but it's Ms. Mooney right here. And she is concerned about stormwater issues that she is dealing with that are coming from basically all of Hillcrest Drive and going through her property. And she was hoping that there could be some type of stormwater management that's implemented on this, because water will likely run down Chester Street at that point. So I think it's a shared issue that Ms. Mooney and the applicant may have.
Okay. So just to clarify, maybe Mr. Markinot can clarify. So I don't see any slope indication. I guess there's the contours.
These are the contours. So basically this area is the highest point.
Okay.
And it goes lower as you go this way. And this is all EMC property back here, which isn't developed.
So can I ask then, just to your point, John, if the abutter is uphill, then I'm not sure how stormwater management on this property could be addressed if they are downhill.
As I understand it, stormwater comes from here and runs this way. Right? So it's going to run down Chester Street likely.
Yes.
Because it's not coming, I'm not saying the stormwater for this. I'm saying the stormwater from the roadway and the other development portions.
Understood. I'm just saying that for that applicant, this entire site is downhill from that applicant.
Correct. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
I'm just since she was not able to attend the meeting, I am passing along her comments.
Okay. Got it. Okay. And I that's where I'm at, is that if this development was, if this proposal was uphill, then I could see potentially finding a way to mitigate that. But given that they're downhill, seems like it's going to be hard to solve how to keep water from not continuing on that pathway.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I think my point might have gotten a little confused. I'm not saying what's just concerned about stormwater from here. I'm saying the applicant, I don't know if they've looked at this, and it'd be something that Beta and the applicant might want to look at. The stormwater that is already existing may also run down Chester Street and need to be mitigated.
Okay, got it. So it's not a function of solving for that abutter, it's a function of
addressing they may have a shared interest because stormwater may be affecting both lots.
Got it.
And it's something that the consultant and the applicant should look at.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, John, for that summary. And we do have comments from the fire department. And I think Chief Slamman is on. I think John already hit on the roadway width, but maybe Chief Slamman, if you just want to summarize your comments on this proposal.
Yeah, I think when we were reviewing it, there was a question of what happens after the property. Again, we have that on a bunch of our roads like Leonard Street, Montana, some of the other ones. We don't know what's happening afterwards. So that's why we're having the discussion about the 20-foot of roadway and whether there's a water main that's going to run. So I don't really understand the whole site and how it will operate in the future.
Okay. And I think what you're referring to is, that looking at this not just from a perspective of one lot that might be built on, but given that there's actually two lots, this very well likely in the future could turn into two homes instead of just one.
Yeah, and that's why we just encourage the evaluation of water main extension and roadway width, because it's just my experience is some of these tend to grow later because of things we're not seeing in this piece. So I'll leave that to you guys to analyze. I can't quite see it from this plot.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. And then, Mr. Paradise, do you want to? And I know that let's stay away from the stormwater stuff right now, since the information that you got was not the most current or not accurate. But with regards to things beyond stormwater, do you just want to give us a summary of your review?
Yes, so we had a chance to look at it. We had to walk out there. Generally, the existing condition is consistent with what we saw out there. The plan, the application requests a number of waivers, consistent probably with low impact development and consistent with the area as well, except for the width of the road. As the chief mentioned, this so there is a concern of getting in and out of any turnaround, or obviously we would defer to the chief, but typically a road of a small road of this nature is in the range of a minimum of 16 to 18 feet, not 12 feet. If it's going to be treated as a driveway, that's a different issue. So I leave that up to the board for their discussion. But yeah, generally the site slopes to the rear, so the stormwater management we see is likely to be able to be accommodated. We just need a number of things to confirm that. Other than that, I'm all set.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Paradise. And Chief Simon, just going back, I know in a lot of cases in these types of proposals, we see some type of turnaround at the end of the street, a hammerhead, a cul-de-sac, something like that. And I just want to make sure that you're always very comprehensive, but maybe it's worth kind of hearing your perspective on whether or not some type of turnaround is important here.
I guess I would urge the board to consider, we start bargaining against ourselves in public safety. So what the bylaw or the intent to try to meet the bylaw, like John suggested, is the subdivision road. If it's going to be a standard subdivision, it's 500 feet and it would have a cul-de-sac. It's 1,000 feet if it's open space and would have a cul-de-sac. And then if we're not going to do those things because of circumstances, I don't want to get ahead of myself making suggestions here. I almost try to make myself available to you to offer suggestions, but I think we're getting plans that are already quite a ways down the path, and decisions have been made that don't represent the bylaws. So that's where I struggle. And I think I've said that to you probably in a lot of meetings. So I think these are perfect examples. If they don't have any extensions, and we want to talk about kind of like when I showed you what fire sprinklers can do and how we could talk to builders and developers maybe to make smaller roads and add other protections, those are conversations we could get into. But again, I don't want to just jump out there. Everybody thinks I'm trying to sprinkle every house in Hopkinton, and that's not the case. I'm just trying to get to yes if you're asking me to. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So a couple of thoughts here. As I look at the outline topics, I think those as described, we can get through those pretty quickly. But I guess what I'm wondering, and I'm curious if people have thoughts, I'm wondering if it would be beneficial for us to go straight to the requested waivers here. And that might just help us. I know we always have a lot of discussion on waivers, but I think that might help us just direct the applicant with regards to kind of the areas that we really want to dig into further, or the areas that they might benefit from coming back with an updated design. Does that make sense that we start to work through those waivers? Are people comfortable with that? I'm seeing thumbs up.
I'm comfortable with that, but a quick question before, if I may.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I heard it mentioned that we could treat it as a driveway, but I don't think that's correct because there is no frontage, correct? I think we have to treat this just like a new road, like we did with another applicant that we currently have.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And again, as I look at the decision criteria, the standard for approving the paper street design and construction details is that the board must apply the current subdivision regulations to the greatest extent practicable.
Okay, great, thanks. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so it does give us the ability to consider modifications, but we should be looking at this as a subdivision. And I think that's in line with what Chief Slamon is emphasizing as well. That should really be the starting point for us, is those subdivision.
Yes, because
standards.
one house, like he said, one house now leads to 2 or 3 houses added on later, right?
Yep. Okay. So let's go ahead and start going through the waivers. And I'm just going to go through these. Section 5.4 environmental analysis, and I'll look to maybe Mr. Markedon, if you could just comment on quickly about your rationale for the requested waiver.
Sure. All of these waivers, in my mind, speak to scope and scale. We look at this fully wooded, no skeletons in the closet, no past history we have to dig into. A residential use is proposed, single family, given the zoning down there. The potential for multiple lots does not exist. There are 2 homes, one on the east side that Sean is proposing, and the potential for one on the left. They have fought a road through from EMC and prevailed, as Sean mentioned a moment ago. So I think we're looking at one home now, perhaps a second, perhaps that never comes to fruition. So a traffic impact, if I'm jumping ahead slightly, I apologize, but 5.4 environmental analysis and traffic impact, one home didn't seem to warrant that level of scrutiny.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess I was starting with the environmental analysis, but I think you're making the same argument for both of those, and that the
Agreed.
impact is likely very low. Any concerns with this waiver, with the waiver from the environmental analysis from the board? Fran, can you unmute yourself?
I know, yes, sir.
There you go.
All right, now it's all done. Yeah, so just through the chair, just one question, maybe it's directed toward the beta team. Are they comfortable with no environmental analysis on behalf of the applicant?
Good question. Mr. Paradise?
Yeah, so this is not a huge development, as Joe mentioned. It's a single resident home, actually, and it doesn't fall into impacts related to wetlands or environmental and endangered species or floodplains that are mapped at this time. And so I don't think it's a huge step to, I think I would have provided a narrative if I were Joe, but other than that, I don't think there's much to consider here, so.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'll open that up again. Any reservations from the board? Okay, let's move on to the next one, which would be also section 5.4 traffic impact report. There's no traffic report submitted. Again, I'll just echo, I think this is reasonable. I don't think if we evaluate this from looking at 2 houses, I think a traffic report sounds like a lot of work and probably unnecessary expense.
Mr. Chair, just one clarification.
Yes.
Is the board voting on these waivers now or just discussing them?
I was not voting on them. I was just discussing them. I felt, I don't know, we could vote on them, and maybe since we're discussing them, maybe that makes sense. I just didn't want to sort of get too far ahead of ourselves. Would you recommend that we vote on them?
I would leave it up to the applicant to make that determination if they want to move forward with voting on the waivers. That can take a step out of the process, but if they want to change the plan, then they might have to reapply for the waivers if they've already been voted, or the board might have to reconsider the waivers.
Fran,
Just
go ahead.
a thought on that, Mr. Chairman. I think it's prudent now to discuss the waivers and provide maybe some feedback and guidance to the applicant. But I do think the voting of the waivers themselves feels to me better served toward the end of the process. Just to John's point, maybe there's some changes there. And I think once we go through vetting the various aspects, I'd feel more comfortable then voting on the waivers at that point, as opposed to doing it up front and then going through the process. But that's just,
I was going to make the same comment.
okay.
Okay. So to the applicant, does that seem, well, I think as long as we're not voting on, if you wanted us to vote on them, we could, but I think I would agree with that sentiment that we'll go ahead and through discuss them and hopefully provide some good input for you. And then we'll hold off on the vote until a later point in time.
Discussion is fine at this point.
Okay. All right. So traffic impact report. Any concerns from the board with regards to that waiver for the traffic impact report? Okay. I've got Dave Paul in the back of my head. why are we considering waivers? But again, I think these feel reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Section 5.4.1 in cross sections at 50-foot intervals. And again, I think this is something that I know we've waived in the past, particularly on these smaller projects. Given what they've identified as a relatively straightforward road construction. Are there any concerns from the board with regards to this waiver?
Concerns.
Okay. Section 8.2.1, locations and alignments of all subsections as shown on project plans. Any concerns?
Can you give an explanation on that, please?
Yeah, what is that?
Yes.
That section of the regulations tends to deal with center line radiuses, creating safe sight distance, creating safe vehicular traffic. We are simply extending Hillcrest Drive down Chester. Didn't seem like it really applied to us, but I thought better safe than sorry.
So that makes sense. I don't think we have a concern with it. I think we just wanted to know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is we don't particularly want to waive something we don't need to be addressing and don't need to waive. So we should understand it better if we do need a waiver.
So I think that's a great question, Muriel, and I'll look to John. Is that, in your interpretation, something that would need to be waived?
That's a good question. I'd have to look at these in more detail to see if they would apply.
Okay. So in any case, we're not voting on it today. Joe, we can, maybe John, if you can look into that, and I'd love to get your interpretation of it. But if we do think that's necessary, then it's probably warrants a little bit more discussion so we understand it. But maybe it's not required.
Through the chair, just a question on process, because I want to remain in the back of your head, which I think is good. I think Phil made a comment about number one. Maybe if we just, is it possible if we just get a narrative on that, we don't have to have a waiver, because the less waivers we have, the better. John?
I think that's probably a question more for Mr. Markadot.
Yeah.
If he's willing to, if he's willing to put forth a brief narrative, then that might eliminate the need for a waiver request there.
I think the first part of the question is the narrative acceptable to John?
I'm not making the decision, the board is. So that would be up to the board.
So the subdivision regs must require the environmental analysis. I feel like I thought the comment from Phil was the request with a narrative to explain it would make better sense. I don't think the need for the waiver disappears.
Can we check with Phil, please? Because I thought he was saying that in place of a waiver.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about the first waiver, or are we talking about the location alignment waiver?
The first waiver.
The first one.
Yes, that would still require a waiver. Phil, I believe Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, was just saying in place of a waiver, he would have provided a narrative because that would have served as the environmental analysis.
That's what I was asking, if we could request that. Because it wasn't asking for a report, it was asking for analysis.
The concern with that is if Mr. Markadop submits a narrative that the board determines to be insufficient, that would be a problem. He would have to either draft another one that would be more sufficient or request a waiver. So I think he probably just went the easy route and requested a waiver.
Mr. Markadop, did you have something to add?
I believe your regulations spell out the need for qualifications of the folks that prepare that environmental analysis, a master's degree with a science background. So I could take a stab at it, but we still may not meet the strict requirements in your regulations. So I'd be happy to provide a narrative, touch on those high points, but I still feel we'd need a waiver.
I'm fine with it.
Qualifications.
I can withdraw the request now that we've discussed it. I just thought it might be an easy thing just to remove from the item.
I think it's a totally fair question, Dave, but it sounds like, given the scale and scope of this, that makes sense. All right, section 8.2.2, curbing, no curbing proposed. So Joe, is that consistent with the other streets in the neighborhood?
No curbing on the other streets, but I will offer this, that our latest revision that is still in review over at Beta includes curbing to control stormwater. So that was going to be struck from the waiver list once Phil and I come to a meeting of the minds.
Okay. So I don't think if you're going to include curbing, then no reason for us to discuss that further. Section 8.2.3, width of street, right of way, pavement width. I think this one is going to warrant some discussion from us. And Joe, I think you already kind of hit on the rationale for the width of the street. I'll tell you, this is one that personally I struggle with, and I know how much we've talked about improving access for emergency vehicles, even in the case of driveways. And I guess personally, I don't see a lot of rationale for why this should be narrower. Feels like there's room on the lot for the new street to comply with our subdivision regulations. So this is one that I struggle with, and I'd love to see the applicant come back with a better solution than 12-foot paved surface. But I'll love to get input from other members of the board.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree, Gary.
Okay. Joe, any further questions for the board, or I think it sounds like there's a lot of consistency there that we'd like to see this.
Yeah, we're hearing the message. I guess we'll have to get with Sean and Amy to see what feels appropriate. We're coming at it from the same idea. If we're limited scope, if we're a few traffic trips a day, I appreciate Chief Slamon's concerns and the battle he has townwide. But in this particular location, I'm hard pressed to see how 18-foot is necessary for a couple of trips out in the morning, a couple of trips home in the evening. But we'll get together as a group and decide which way to head.
So can I just clarify, would this be a public street once it's constructed?
That was my impression, yes.
Okay. So I think for me, that just reinforces the point that we should hold it to the standard. Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
What is the requirement as far as if it's a paper street to make it a driveway? What it could be a driveway with two houses attached to it, similar to what we've done lots of other places. Mr. Markadent, can I, through the chair?
Yeah. Actually, John might be the best person to answer that.
So the lots wouldn't have frontage. They wouldn't have any frontage on any street.
Oh, okay.
Muriel?
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate? We often get a lot of insight from going out and taking a site visit. Would that be appropriate to suggest we schedule?
You know, it's a great question. I was thinking about that earlier because I was going to try and get over there and see it for myself. And I agree. I think that would be helpful. So I guess maybe Mr. Markedont or Mr. and Mrs. McDonald, would you be open to a site walk? We typically do these on Saturday mornings. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, to Meryl's point, it's helpful just for us to see it and get some real perspective. The site walks are always immensely helpful. It's not meant to be a discussion. We can't actually have any back and forth. It's just an opportunity for the applicant to show us specifically what they're proposing.
Sure.
From a timing perspective,
You're doing Saturday.
yeah, how do as a board, how do we feel about this Saturday?
I'm available.
Works for me.
I'm available.
What time? was it the 9 o'clock?
Early, Sundar. Earlier the better.
That's fine. I mean,
yeah,
standard.
9 o'clock is the standard time. We can move it forward.
No.
Let's. I think there's a mixed response there, and again, this is a neighborhood, so let's stick with 9 a.m. this Saturday.
Where's the best place to meet?
Yeah, that was just going to be my next
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry.
Is I'm wondering if there are spaces for 9+ cars. This is also the sidewalks are also open to the public, but for those of you that are familiar with it, are there places we can park, or is there street parking available, or where would you recommend we convene?
There's enough street parking to be able to put 9 cars around.
There is.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the date on that? Is it the 24th?
24th. Yep, 24th.
I have another commitment.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm stretched as well. I'm in 2 places.
At some other point in time.
So the next Saturday would be Halloween, October 31st, which personally for me is more challenging than the 24th.
No, I'll just make a point of trying to get up there at some other point in time too. So
Okay.
I will as well.
Mr. Chair, I would have to do the same thing. I have a very early morning commitment. I won't be done by 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And if it could be moved to 9:30, I could definitely make it.
Okay, you're nice and clear. What happened?
Tennis gets in the way.
No, he said nice and clear. We can hear you now.
Oh yeah, no, I moved to my cell phone. I'm doing poor choices now. No computer, just a smartphone.
Yeah. Okay.
We can do 9:30.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we do 9:30? Does that work for everybody?
9:30 is fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
9:30 sidewalk.
And are we parking on Hillcrest? I'm sorry to appear dense, but I'll be the person parking on Hayward. Hillcrest.
The end. Yeah.
You can park on Hillcrest.
Okay, thank you.
Or in my case, I'm just going to ride my bike.
There you go.
I hope it snows, Gary.
Rain would be worse.
Don't say that, Muriel. I'll have to give up my tennis then.
Don't say that, not yet.
All right. So moving forward, section 8.2.5 A, B, and C, dead end streets, no turnaround. Again, I put this in the category of the street width. And again, just thinking of garbage trucks, deliveries, snow plows. I also struggle a little bit with rationalizing why we would not have a turnaround of some kind, particularly when it seems like space would permit it.
Yeah, I'd give that one a red asterisk as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
If I may?
Yes.
Just a thought to consider. There's an emotional attachment to this land that's obvious. This has been set aside for the kids to to build on. There's real concern about the tree clearing that would take place with a large turnaround. And what point do we stop? We can turn the UPS guy around. We can turn the trash guy around. What point do we say, okay, that's sufficient? And how much tree clearing takes place to get to the perfect scenario? That was the hesitancy on this end, to include the turnaround and take down more trees, make more changes to that site than absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe, for offering that up. I would say, at least for me personally, there might be some other options that you can minimize tree clearing. I mean, even, again, elsewhere we've considered hammerheads or something to kind of ease turning around. Right now, it doesn't appear to be a way to turn around there without backing back down the street.
Quick suggestion: we could all look at it during the sidewalk.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, section 8.3.1 to 8.3.4 sidewalks. There is no sidewalk proposed. And again, I'll just ask, I'm assuming that there are not sidewalks on the other streets in the neighborhood?
Correct. Matches what's in the adjacent areas.
Okay.
Dave Paul, the sidewalk guy, is okay without sidewalks.
Well, I'm sorry, Dave, could you say that again?
Dave Paul, the sidewalk guy, is okay without sidewalks.
I just wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any thoughts on sidewalks?
I can be flexible on sidewalks.
Yeah, makes sense not to have them for this.
I know my board would have my back.
All right, section 8.4.4, comprehensive erosion and sediment control plan as shown on project plans. And this one, Joe, I'm assuming this just fits into the scope and scale debate again, and trying to kind of make sure we don't go crazy on engineering expenses and
That's
work.
the gist of it. We have elements control, sedimentation control. We have silt fence. We have a construction entrance to knock the mud off the vehicle tires. We have those elements on the plan, just not a standalone plan for erosion and sedimentation control.
Okay.
So it's not as if there won't be measures proposed. We just don't have a single standalone plan.
Okay.
Okay, and I know Deb's got a question, but
No, it was just to the earlier statement that the neighbor is experiencing water going down. I was just wondering if the present plan accommodates for the water drainage that's coming across the existing road.
We were out there, Sean and I, this afternoon. He's aware of that concern voiced by that neighbor. We are picking up the curbing right at her driveway. So we think we'll divert an awful lot of that water that now settles off the pavement and pools in her front yard, puddles there. So we have something on the plans. It may need further study. Perhaps we wrap the curbing further into her driveway or back the curbing up a loom to keep the water in the right of way and not on private property. So I guess we're heading in that direction. I guess we'd like the opportunity for further study.
okay. And just to clarify, and this might be a question for John, but we do have a proposed condition for erosion and sediment control measures during the construction period. But I think what we're talking about here is erosion and sediment control plan. Is that just during construction or is that post-construction as well?
Usually it's just during construction. There's not too much erosion that happens after the built condition. And they would be dealing with stormwater runoff through the stormwater management system.
Got it. Okay.
Generally just construction.
And I think that's what I just wanted to, and I appreciate, Joe, you guys still taking the necessary control measures. And if we've captured that in a condition, then personally for me, I'm comfortable with it. But again, I'll ask the board if they have any additional concerns with that waiver. Okay. Streetlights. And again, I'm assuming this is consistent with the rest of the neighborhood, that there are no streetlights and I won't make any assumptions about the board's perspective on this, but I'll ask, are there any objections to or any concerns with regards to waiving the requirement for streetlights?
I have no concerns.
No.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may jump in, with Whisper Way, there was a concern that the same thing with this, and we've talked about how should they be waiving things that aren't being proposed. And in the subdivision regs, it says the number and location of proposed streetlights, if any, shall be shown on the definitive plans. So if they're not showing any, we had the same conversation at Whisper Way. If they're not showing any, then it probably doesn't need to be waived. This was probably just done in an abundance of caution, but it's up to the board to decide if they need to go through with this waiver.
So in that case, if there aren't any objections, I'd recommend the applicant remove that waiver request.
Agreed.
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 All right, section 9.12 or 9.12.4. And again, if I recall, this one kind of fits into the same description as the street lighting, that no existing trees to be retained within the right of way and no shade trees proposed for the project. I think that's more a function of identifying trees that would be removed, but maybe I'm misspeaking here. But Joe, help me out here.
We've got narrow right of way. We've got utilities proposed for both sides of the paved street. So it appeared like anything inside the right of way was going to be impacted by what we're proposing. But Sean is intent on retaining as many of the large trees in there to keep the privacy, to keep the nature of the lot the same. So we felt that the ones retained simply with Sean's input would be enough to create that look, to capture that feel that we all want. It's not as if we're coming through with the 50-foot right-of-way and then need to augment that. So this was more along the lines of no one knows the spot better than the guy who's going to own it.
I've got no objections to this. Anybody else from the board?
So through the chair, I thought you were suggesting maybe we don't need this waiver. Do you want to check with John?
Yeah. Good question, Dave. Thank you. John?
He's looking. Well, to give him a second to look, Mr. Chair, they mentioned utilities.
I knew you were going to ask that.
Underground?
Yeah, so question, Mr. Barncanot, will the utilities be underground on this?
Yes, they will.
Perfect.
Nice.
So the waiver that I'm assuming this is for 9.12.4 that you're talking about?
Yes.
It says existing trees to be retained within the right of way plus the 10-foot strip parallel thereto shall be marked in the field to avoid accidental damage. Grades within the drip line of such trees shall not be changed more than 6 inches and not less than 25% of the area shall be retained within 4 inches of present grade. Tree wells or retaining walls shall be used where necessary to accomplish this and shall be of fieldstone with a thickness at any point of not less than 1/3 the depth below retained grade unless an alternative is detailed in the plan submittals and approved by the board. Street trees shall not be planted between the sidewalk and the street.
All right, so just to summarize that, what I'm hearing is that because they're not retaining any trees in the right of way, there is no necessary waiver on this requirement. I guess that's not true because it also specifies no trees. Well, there's also no sidewalks.
Right.
So again, I'd argue, I guess I'm struggling with if this waiver request is necessary.
I mean, I would say this one, since it's such a gray area, may be worth keeping just to cover everyone's bases, but.
Right. I mean, there's no harm in keeping it through the chair. There's no harm in keeping it per se, because when we get around to actually voting on it, if we feel that it's either germane or not necessarily relevant, we can vote up or down on the waiver.
Right, and I think that Mr. Marketing had said that the plans were going to get a little more detailed, so we'd see, if trees were affected or not, or And I'm sure Sean will take care of that. So
I think the strategy is if we can, without question, remove it, let's do so. But if there's any question, let's keep it.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds fair, but I don't anticipate any issues with that one. Okay. And then last requested waiver, all improvements and utilities to be constructed in accordance with attached project plans. And Joe, give us a little rationale for that waiver, because it doesn't necessarily
There was a kind
feel
of
like a waiver.
the kitchen sink, Mr. Chairman, that if there's anything I missed, the construction will be according to the plans that you approve. Didn't want to get down the road a year from now and have someone say, we didn't talk about that specifically at the hearing. So a lot of thought and effort goes into the plans, design, review, and permitting. It's just a way to a catch-all kitchen sink kind of thing.
To the chair, I would suggest we remove it. It doesn't have any reference to a section.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm also not.
I agree too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like an umbrella waiver. So obviously, I'm not sure how.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't really like the idea of umbrella waivers either, because
I mean, just the nature of the fact that we're approving it with waivers and approving, going through the whole process, I think implies that there is backup and belief in the plan. So.
okay.
I want to comment, Mr. Chair, this new process of going through the waivers first and general discussion, I think works very well. So thank you for doing that.
It's a good pilot. We'll see.
Can I just say something through you, Mr. Chair, and not to directly rebut you, Dave, because that's not what I mean. I just want to, I agree, but I also agree with the concept of waiting until the applicant has had an opportunity to present the fuller picture before we fully decide on the waivers. There's pros and cons both ways, but certainly waiting to the very end to do the waivers proved to be problematic. So,
Well, that kind of makes sense too.
And through the chair, that's kind of what we've done, because we've discussed, but we haven't voted on them.
Yeah.
No, but I think she needs an overall presentation from the applicant.
Yep.
First.
Okay. So we do have someone on the phone, a member from the public. So if we can unmute the, I won't read off, I guess it's 435-9314. And if that person can state your name and address, and we'd be more than happy to hear your comments and or your question.
Yeah, my name is Joe Forcier, 53 Hillcrest Drive. I own the abutting property where the road's going through, and I have some concerns concerning the utilities. Also, what they're going to do with the telephone pole that's on the corner that lies within the road area. Is that going to be moved, and how they're going to handle that?
All right, Mr. Markinaut, do you want to answer those questions?
Yeah, as I stated a moment ago, utilities are underground. The pavement configuration fits around that utility pole. That utility pole does not need to be relocated.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Forcier?
I have another question.
Go ahead.
I was involved in a very similar situation in a neighboring town a few years back. And the situation was put to me that if you were going to run utilities over, on, or under my cross property, I had to have some type of approval to do that.
Okay. So I guess my question for Mr. Markinaut is, would the utilities be running across his property, or are they in the existing right-of-way?
They're in the existing right-of-way unless he's referring to something else on another portion of his property. The pole that we're going to gain access to for power is in the right-of-way.
Mr. Forcier, does that, I mean, maybe this is another good one that when we are there on Saturday morning on the site walk, we can take a look at that, because I suspect this might be a function of, right of way versus where the actual street is. But hard to say without taking a look. So maybe we can make sure that we can take a look at where that utility pole is on the site walk on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd be happy to discuss it with you.
Okay. And I should just clarify, I realize this is a little difficult to explain, but we don't want to have any discussion on the site walk. We can certainly we want to have information provided as to us, but we want to avoid any back and forth discussion since it is not a public hearing. But we'll definitely have the applicant show us where it is, and hopefully you're able to join us on that when we're there, Mr. Forcier. Okay. And I'm wondering, and this might feel a little bit redundant, but we do have an outline. I think we've talked about a lot of these things, but maybe we can, just from a process perspective, we can kind of quickly check them off. And as I look at 4.1, vehicle and pedestrian traffic flow, truck traffic flow, and emergency vehicle access, I think that one is still open, given the turnaround and street width. I'm just going to quickly kind of go through these. Stormwater management is also open, given pending review of the stormwater management plan. Utilities and water sewer use. Any other, again, per the applicant, those will be underground and they will have a water and sewer tie-in. Are there any other questions or discussion items from the board or the public for that matter?
I'm okay with checking that off.
Except for the question that Mr. Forcier had. I think other than that, it's settled. Yeah.
Okay. Sidewalks, I think we can close that one out as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Historic resources, if applicable. And I will say that I think that the initial reaction is always like, well, no, there's no historic structures on the lot, but we have had several proposals that have had Native American cultural structures of significance. I'm not sure. I guess to some degree we're dependent on. I don't know. Muriel, I'm actually going to look to you. Given that how do we sort of address this topic without sort of, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of, without having someone that is specifically looking for these types of historic resources or structures. Any guidance?
To be honest, Mr. Chair, I think that this is a relatively new situation that has come up for us. And the only time that I have known that it's come up for us is on large tracts of land that were proposed for a bigger subdivision, which we didn't actually address because it was a post decision that it came up, and the two recent solar farm proposals. And as far as I recall it, those folks with the knowledge that there were or could be resources on the property came forward.
Yeah. So I guess maybe we'll leave it at this. The site walk is open to the public on Saturday. So if there are interested parties that want to take a look at it from this perspective, then they are welcome to join us on Saturday and take a look. Does that seem reasonable to folks? Sure.
To Mario's point, nobody's brought any historical sites to our attention. So can we check it off? And then if one comes up in our subsequent meetings, we could open it up again?
I think that's reasonable. Okay. Impact on schools, other municipal services, and neighboring residential properties. I think given Mr. Forcier, maybe we'll leave this one open for the time being, just until we can kind of confirm the impact of that utility pole move.
Agreed.
And then are there any other topics that we didn't cover that people want to bring to our attention?
If Frank was here, he'd say solar panels, but I think we're good with that one.
Yeah, we do need a solar guy. Think about that if you're going to run for the planning board next time.
All right. So I think now is probably a good time for us to end our discussion on this one for the time being. I think we'll have a little more clarity after the site walk, and then after Beta has a chance to review the updated or proper stormwater management plan. So I'm.
Can I just say one more thing, Mr. Chair? I'm sorry. I missed my opportunity when we were talking about the waivers. I have no objection to sort of being amenable to the runoff, the mitigation measures during construction. But we are right on top of the lake. So it's possible that we would put some things explicitly in the decision to make sure that whatever measures are used are appropriate for the location so close to the lake. That was my only point.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and I think that certainly is one of the reasons it's worth giving that stormwater management plan a good comprehensive assessment. So given the fullness of our November 2nd agenda, I'm wondering if the applicant is open to continuing this one to the November 16th planning board meeting.
Sure.
Okay. And then John, do we need to extend the decision date at all? I think we're still within our window.
So this one is different because there's no real statutory requirement for a decision. So it would be beneficial to just, an abundance of caution, extend the decision to 2 weeks after the hearing.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to continue the petition to construct Chester Street to November 16th and continue the decision to November 30th.
Sundar Sivaraman, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
All right, and no further discussion. We'll vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
And Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Markinot. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. McDonald. And we'll see you on Saturday.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So let's go back to Maspinock Woods. And I just want to sort of take temperature here. How do people feel about moving forward without having the applicant?
So, Mr. Chair, if I might, last time, I feel like we have sort of flogged this particular conundrum till its last moments on Earth. I think that the applicant has done a very credible job to do as best as they can, given the changing parameters. They're actually the second applicant, so everything shifted for them. We are making an exception to the zoning that we would not ordinarily do, but we have to figure out something here. And if I recall, what we asked the applicant's attorney to do was make sure that he codified for us exactly what the exception we were making and why, to explain it in a format that was captured and understandable. And I think that they have done that. So I'm very comfortable moving forward because I don't think anything is going to change from this point forward.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I was moving for a vote for the last meeting, so I'm for it as well.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm totally in favor of moving forward with this one as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. And I do, just in the interest of completeness, we did have a couple of open items on the outline. So maybe we can just quickly close that out. One of those was on stormwater management. And I don't recall why this was still open, but we skipped over it. This is where really, really long open hearings get tricky, is because we discussed it at some point a long, long time ago.
With the chair, just suggestion, maybe can John just put his hand up so we can visualize it and jog our memories?
I missed one word in that because somebody
Okay.
coughed.
Can you just pull up the plan?
I wanted the word, please.
Oh, was it please that he was looking for?
No, I think it was plans. I couldn't tell if he said plans or letter or what it was.
So just so people know, the two open items we had were stormwater management and then site lighting. And John's pulling those up now.
Well, while we're talking about it, can we cross off site lighting as it's not applicable?
I'm comfortable with that.
Yep, I'm good with that too.
Cool.
Okay.
They aren't proposing any lighting, are they?
No.
I
No.
don't think so, no.
Okay. It used to be an entranceway, right? That's the whole start of this
Yes.
conundrum.
Yeah. Many moons ago.
And this is the one also where the neighbors were interested in getting this done as well, right?
Yep.
It's been through the chair. It's been a decrepit house for a long, long time. That's on the property today.
So just Mr. Chairman, through the chair, question.
Yes.
How's this coming up? So maybe this is before my time, or maybe it was before my time and then during my time. What is the rationale for the request of moving the setback to 50 feet as opposed to the normal setback of 100 feet on the front of the lot?
So, John, do you want to take that question? You can probably describe that more articulately than I can.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, what was that?
Did it have something to do with wetlands?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they were. There was concerns with the wetlands, and there were concerns with the design of the site. And eventually, at the beginning, this was supposed to be an entrance. It was supposed to be part of the development, and now it's more of a standalone structure. So they're trying to keep it more in the actual footprint of the existing building, rather than move it around on the site, as I understand it.
Okay. I mean, I drove to the property today, and the building itself is set back about 100 feet, give or take, right? If they want to kind of move it up.
I don't believe, I think they're keeping it in the same location.
No,
It was just.
no, they're not. They're taking it down, and what they're doing is they're trying to restore vernal pools in the back. And by doing so, it cuts off some of the buffer on some of the edges of the garage, and they shape the deck to try to accommodate as well. But essentially, I think the septic system may be where the existing footprint was.
Okay. So that helps provide some context. I mean, 50 feet is not very much space. It's kind of where that real little trailer is on the property now. But having that understanding of what they want to try to do with some vernal pools and the septic, I get it, because it's wet. If you're looking at it, it's wet just to the left of that area anyway. So, okay, if they want to move it closer, it's a busy road, but Yeah.
So John, just to confirm, I know not the garden style apartment zoning, but the underlying zoning for that area, what is the setback requirement from the road?
So in the RB district, which is what the underlying zoning is, it's 50 feet from the street line, and then side yard is 25 feet and rear yard is 20 feet.
Okay.
So they would be complying with the underlying zoning, even though they are technically within the guard district, yet not part of that development itself.
That's the really important part for me, is that given how this property is going to be used, that underlying RB zoning requirements, I think is the most relevant. I mean, the reality is this probably should just be broken out and not even considered with
garden,
the Maspinock Woods. But I think given that they inherited this, they're trying to keep this as reasonable and straightforward as possible. And I think that if they removed it, that would require an amendment to the Maspinock Woods proposal, which is just that much more work.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it would require a pretty massive undertaking that would be a major change to the whole design. I do think that it makes a lot of sense for us. I mean, I'm rhythming towards approving it because I don't see a better way forward. I do think that it makes sense to really make sure we document that really well, because we are doing something truly different. Considering the underlying zoning that actually doesn't apply anymore because of the zoning of the entirety of the project.
Yeah,
Chair,
I agree. Yes, Deb, go ahead.
in that documentation, what that Muriel brought up, I'd like to suggest a condition.
Okay.
The condition I'd like to set has to do with the wetlands restoration on the side of the property. And I'd like them to say that in perpetuity, that the wetlands would be maintained and not filled in. Like, because I know how it creeps too, because people will buy something and they say, well, I want more grass, and they'll just slowly work their way back. But what I like to do is make sure that there's a condition in there to maintain it, because they're clearly planning on doing a really nice job. So I just want to reinforce that.
Yeah, and I guess to me that's covered under our existing conservation bylaws, because you can't fill in a wetland. And I think that's pretty well spelled out. But I mean, do other people have thoughts on whether we should add a condition specific to that?
Yeah, I would feel uncomfortable voting on something with a condition without the applicant here.
I agree with through the chair. I agree with Dave, and I agree that that is covered elsewhere. That's not. We shouldn't just be duplicating other regulations in town.
Through the chair, I would also agree that we not go into Conservation Commission regulations.
Okay.
Through the chair, I also agree with the spirit of the comment from Deb. Yeah, so, yeah, but it's covered.
Okay. Deb, are you comfortable with that?
I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I feel that it's in these developments, just my general statement is, in these developments, it gets lost over a period of time. And so the only reason I would put it in would be that it would just be another place for it to pop up.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just add something to that?
Sure.
So when we add conditions to decisions as a planning board, they have to be within the jurisdiction of the planning board. Otherwise, if they get appealed, they're going to get overturned. So we can't necessarily just put in conditions because we think they're important if they're in another board's jurisdiction. So the Conservation Commission oversees the wetlands. It's not really the planning board's ability or jurisdiction to do so. And should Maspinock Woods bring this before a court and say, we don't like this condition, it'll probably get overturned because it's not something that relates to the planning board decision at all.
So I'm going to recommend we move forward and not add that condition. Waivers. I don't think there are any waiver requests. Is that correct, John?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's really one giant waiver request.
I guess that's a good way to describe it. Don't say it like that.
I'm sorry.
So close, Muriel. So close.
I know.
Yeah. All right. So criteria for approval. And again, just to specify this, there's actually two different things we're reviewing. There's a special permit approval criteria, and that's that the proposed development constitutes a desirable development in the neighborhood and the town, that the proposed development will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town, that the plans generally provide adequately for convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to adjacent streets, property, or improvements, with the understanding that review of such items will be more detailed as the site plans at the site plan stage. The plan appears to provide adequate methods of disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes, adequate methods for drainage for surface water and seasonal flooding, if any, an adequate provision of water for domestic purposes, with the understanding that review of such items will be more detailed at the site plan stage, that the plan complies with the master plan, that the provisions of section 210, 72A and B of this article have been met, and that the town of Hopkinton has not met the statutory goal to provide 10% of its housing stock as affordable housing pursuant to section 20 through 23 of chapter 40B. And just a note that this criterion was adopted after the project was approved and therefore does not apply to the project. So any questions about that criteria? Does it all make sense? I think we're all probably pretty well aligned that is reasonable. I wonder if maybe what we do is we go through the special permit of, does it make sense, John, to go through the special approval permit stuff first and then go to the site plan? You don't
Whatever
care?
the board thinks would be best. If that's cleaner, then go for it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to keep moving because I think that we're all pretty well aligned here. So as we look at the site plan approval criteria, before the planning board may approve the site plan, it shall determine each of the following: that the plan provides adequately for convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to adjacent streets, properties, or improvements, that the plan assures the plans assure the adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes, and the methods of drainage for surface water and seasonal flooding, if any. All the provisions of this chapter, including section 210, 72A and B, have been complied with and are necessary, and all necessary special permits and variances have been granted from the Board of Appeals. And then if the planning board does not make all of the above determinations, it shall deny the application, stating its reasons for such denial.
I'd make a motion to approve the site plan as described.
Dave Moran, second.
All right, so I think that from a process perspective,
I don't think Jane is eligible to vote on this.
Oh, sorry. You're right. You're right. I withdraw my second.
Ooh, look at Rob.
Oh,
Going
yeah.
deep.
Good catch, Rob.
Wow, Rob.
Look at you play, Rob.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
14 hours at the same desk. I'm still doing strong.
So just on a technicality, we need to vote on the findings first. Is that correct, John?
So they could be voted on at the same time as the decision. This findings just need to be stated. And then somebody could make a motion to approve the decision with the findings and conditions as set forth, if that's an easy way to do it. Or you can vote on the findings, then vote on the decision with the conditions.
I'm comfortable doing them together. And Dave, I'm sorry, was your motion to approve the site plan modification or the special permit?
It was the site plan, but do we do them separately or together? Separately?
Let's do those separately. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the proposed findings for the site plan is that the board finds the proposed amendment to the approved site plan conforms to provisions of section 210-75A.2D, that the plans provide adequately for convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to adjacent streets, property, or improvements, that the plan assures the adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes, and the methods of drainage for surface water and seasonal flooding, if any, and all the provisions of this chapter, including section 210-72A and B, have been complied with, and all necessary special permits and variances have been granted from the Board of Appeals. And then, so I'll entertain a motion that the board amend the previous issued site plan approval under Article 20 of the zoning bylaws dated November 1st, 2006, with all terms and conditions contained in said decision shall remain in effect unless specifically modified by this decision.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
All right. Any further discussion?
To amend the site plan, do we need there's only 6 members of the board that can vote, and we need all 6 members to be able to amend.
We need 5 for site plan, 6 for special permit.
Okay, 5 for site plan. Okay.
All right, Fran, you're muted, Fran.
I do that on purpose, Gary.
Really pulls people in and focuses them on you.
Exactly.
Good.
Next thing I do, I'm going to whisper when I actually go off mute. Just for clarification for myself, am I eligible to vote on this or no? Rob, you seem to be the.
God, I'm sorry.
Fran,
Rob's
Sundar,
newfound
and Jane are not
passion.
eligible.
I'm out.
I just happen to be looking at it at the right time.
I don't know, Fran, does it count that you were on the board when it started?
I know.
I know.
I think John had a comment.
John, did you have a comment?
Oh, sorry. Fran, Jane, and Sundar are not eligible to vote on either of these.
And Jane.
Thank you.
Okay. So are we ready to vote? Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul?
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel?
Harold Kramer, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
And Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
And Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
And Rob, yes. Rob,
Rob
yes.
is yes as well. Okay. I knew I was missing one, but no. You're hitting your prime. I'm winding down here.
He's gunning for your seat. That's what he's doing.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
No.
All right. We're past 10, and I also have been in this seat for a long time, as I think most of you have.
Yeah.
So special permit. In terms of findings, I move that the board find the proposed amendment to the special permit conforms to provision 210-75A1D, that while the proposed development may not meet the setbacks as stated forth in Article 8 of the zoning bylaw, the setbacks do conform to the underlying zoning district, that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in the zoning bylaws, Chapter 210, have been satisfied, and the granting of the special permit will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws, Chapter 210.
Mr. Chair, a friendly amendment. That's Article 13.
Thank you. Article 13.
The old Roman numerals.
Yep. So assuming those findings are good, I will entertain a motion that the board amend the previously issued special permit under Article 13 of the zoning bylaws dated December 20th, 2005, with all terms and conditions contained in said decision shall remain in effect unless specifically modified by this decision.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
All right, and with no further discussion, we'll move to a vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul?
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel?
Harold Kramer, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
And Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Okay. Maybe the applicant should not show up more often.
Yeah, I was thinking that. We're definitely going to hear back from them.
All right. Well, on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Fran?
Andy Young, yes.
Muriel?
Harold Kramer, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar.
Oh, he's frozen.
Sundar.
Oh, he's frozen.
All right. We'll move forward. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Night.
Thank
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night,
Bye
everyone.
all.